My parents said they were too struggling to attend my graduation, so I celebrated alone. Then my cousin posted videos of their lavish vacation to Europe, paid for by unexpected funds. When they called, asking for my help to pay off their credit card debt, I didn't respond. I just sent a link to the vacation videos to every relative in our family chat. Their furious texts and calls didn't stop until morning. Hi Reddit. I'm Alia, 23F, and up until very recently, I was the kind of daughter who tried, really tried, to see the best in her parents, even when it was easier not to. I convinced myself for years that they loved me in their own way, that maybe they just struggled with showing it. That maybe their favoritism, their endless excuses, the way they acted like I owed them for existing, it was all just a misunderstanding. That they'd come around eventually. But what happened after my graduation stripped away any last bit of hope I had left. And it made me realize something. Not all villains come twirling mustaches or slamming doors. Some show up with cheerful smiles, telling you they love you while choosing to hurt you again and again. Let me give you some background. I grew up in a small town with my parents, Leona and Farid. From the outside, we were your average middle-class family, modest home, 2 working parents, and 1 child who, by all appearances, was doing just fine. That child was me. But the truth behind our front door was different. I was never enough for them. Not loud enough, not needy enough, not brilliant enough to be a source of pride. I got good grades, worked hard, stayed out of trouble. They never had to bail me out or worry if I'd disappoint them. And for that, I was treated more like an afterthought than a daughter. Now, enter Nima, my cousin on my dad's side. He's 2 years younger than me, and from the time we were kids, he could do no wrong in their eyes. If he got a C in math, it was because he was thinking on a more creative level. If I got an A, it was barely worth a comment because, of course, Alia did. She always does. When we were 16, my parents gave Nima my old bike, without asking me. When I was 19 and trying to save up for tuition, they borrowed from the savings account I'd been contributing to since I was 14 and forgot to pay me back. But the worst part was, they never treated it like they were doing something wrong. In their minds, it was always justified because we're family, and family helps each other. Of course, helping never seemed to go both ways. When I got into graduate school, they acted mildly supportive. My dad said, "Don't let it change you," which I still don't fully understand. My mom was more worried about how expensive it would be, even though I had secured scholarships and was working part-time on campus. So when my graduation approached this spring, I wasn't expecting them to throw a party or make signs. But I thought they'd come. I really thought they'd show up. I called them a month in advance, told them the date, time, and sent a link to where they could reserve a spot for the ceremony. At first, my mom said, "We'll try our best, sweetie." But the next week, the tone changed. "Your dad's work has been unpredictable lately, and the house still needs repairs. We're really cutting it close financially this month. Between groceries and Nima's dentist appointment. We wish we could be there, but it's just not a good time." I offered to help pay for the bus tickets. I told them I'd cover the hotel, that I just wanted them there. My mom hesitated and said, "We don't want to be a burden, honey. We'd only bring your energy down. You go and enjoy your day." I remember staring at the text for so long that my phone screen dimmed. The day of graduation came. I walked across the stage, cap a little too big on my head, heart pounding in my chest. I scanned the crowd. Strangers cheering, balloons bouncing, families waving. My hands didn't wave back at anyone. Afterward, I went home to my tiny apartment, still in my gown. I sat on the couch with a lukewarm container of noodles and tried to make myself feel proud. I even took a few pictures with the self-timer just so I'd have something to mark the day. My parents didn't call, not even a text until the next evening. "Hope everything went okay." Nima said congratulations. That message stayed unread for a while. I didn't tell them how much it hurt. I didn't tell them how I had waited outside the building after the ceremony for 10 minutes, just watching everyone else laugh and hug their families. I didn't say anything at all. But here's where things started to twist. About 3 weeks after graduation, I was on Instagram during a break from work. I don't usually follow my cousin Nima. His content is mostly flashy, loud, and not for me. But someone had tagged him in a story, and my curiosity got the best of me. I tapped on it. It was a video of Nima in a crowded square, grinning at the camera. Behind him stood the unmistakable silhouette of the Colosseum. I blinked. I watched the next story, him twirling pasta on a fork, bragging about the best carbonara in Rome. Then another, this time in a hotel room with floor-to-ceiling windows, and in the reflection behind him, I spotted a familiar figure, my mom. She was standing by the bed, holding a shopping bag from an upscale boutique. In the background, my dad's voice chimed in, laughing about getting used to the European lifestyle. It was like my lungs forgot how to work. They weren't just on vacation. They were on a multi-country tour. Rome, Venice, Paris, Amsterdam, Geneva, even a brief stop in Prague. For weeks they'd said nothing. Not a word. No social media posts. No, guess where we are, photos to the family chat. Nothing. They were careful. Until Nima decided to brag. And in one of his videos, posted in what looked like a wine cellar-turned-hotel lounge, he laughed and said, "Shout out to the unexpected funds that made this possible. Couldn't have done it without y'all." The comments were full of fire emojis and friends asking what he meant by unexpected funds. He didn't answer, but I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly what he meant. That night, I sat in bed, phone in hand, piecing everything together. The timing, the evasion, the guilt-tripping texts. My parents had lied about not being able to afford a trip to my graduation because they were already planning, or maybe even booking, a luxury vacation to Europe. The next morning, I received a message from my mom. "Hi honey, we're back. Sorry we were a bit MIA. The Wi-Fi was spotty and it was just a whirlwind. Hope everything's okay. Let's catch up soon." No mention of the graduation. No apology. Not even a hint of guilt. And then came the next message, only a few hours later, from my dad. "Alia, we're in a bit of a tight spot. The trip cost more than we expected. Can we talk sometime this week?" That was the moment something inside me shifted. I didn't answer their messages right away. I could have said something impulsive, sent a sarcastic welcome back, or thrown one of Nima's videos in their faces. But part of me needed time. Time to absorb what they'd done. Time to stop shaking from that cold, creeping mix of betrayal and disbelief. I didn't cry. That surprised me. There was no dramatic outburst. Just this quiet weight settling in my chest as I thought back over the last few years. The missed birthdays, the canceled plans, the "we'll try next time" texts I'd received whenever it involved something important to me. And now I knew. They hadn't been too poor or too overwhelmed to show up. They had just chosen not to. They chose Paris over me. Rome over me. They stood under the Eiffel Tower while I stood alone in my cap and gown. A few days passed, and then came the second wave of messages. First was my mom again. "Alia, we really need to talk. Your father and I are in a difficult situation. We were hoping we could count on you." Then, later that same night, my dad sent this. "We know you're busy, but you're the most responsible one in the family. This is a family emergency. Please don't shut us out." I stared at those words for a long time. Responsible one in the family. A phrase I'd heard all my life. It used to make me feel proud, important, but now it just felt like a trap. Like every time I did the right thing, it only made them more comfortable taking me for granted. That night, I called my best friend Lila. She was the only person I'd confided in about what was going on. "I just don't understand how they're not even pretending to be sorry," I said. Lila sighed. "Because they don't think they did anything wrong, Alia. They never have. To them, you're the fallback plan. You're always there, so they don't value you." I didn't say anything. "Seriously," she continued. "They could step on your dreams in steel boots and still expect you to patch their souls." On the fourth day, I finally opened the group chat. It's called Family First. My mom made it a few years ago. It had all the aunts, uncles, cousins, and even my grandmother, who's in her 80s and uses her phone mostly for weather updates and chain prayers. I rarely posted in there. Most messages were either photos of new babies or passive-aggressive reminders about who forgot whose birthday. But as I stared at that group chat, something in me clicked into place. They wanted help? Fine. I'd let the whole family help them understand what they'd done. I went back through Nima's stories, tagged posts, and TikToks. I found footage from every city. Him spinning in front of the Trevi fountain. My mom twirling in a new coat in Geneva. My dad clapping along to a street musician in Paris. I even found a video where Nima thanked his sponsors with a wink. I screen recorded everything. Then I created a Google Drive folder, titled it Alia's Graduation Highlights, and uploaded every single clip. No edits. No captions. Just evidence. At midnight, I dropped the link into the family chat. I said nothing. No explanation, no comments. Just the link. Then I turned off my phone and went to bed. I woke up to chaos. By the time I checked my phone the next morning, there were over 80 unread messages. The first few were confused. Aunt Rima, what is this? Cousin Lena, did someone make a vacation montage? Then the tone shifted. Uncle David, wait, wasn't this during Alia's graduation? Aunt Farah, Leona, you said you couldn't afford to go. Lena, I remember Alia posting she was celebrating alone. And you were in Europe? Then came silence. For about an hour, no one said anything. It was as if the entire group chat collectively paused to put pieces together. And then the flood started. People weren't just upset, they were furious. I had cousins texting me on the side asking if I was okay. An aunt who lives in Canada called me, nearly in tears, saying, "We had no idea, sweetie. I would have come to your graduation if I knew you were going to be alone." But the most surprising reaction came from my grandmother, who almost never comments on anything. She wrote, "This was shameful. Alia worked so hard. We should have celebrated her." That single message set the tone. Finally, after hours of silence, my mom responded in the group. "This isn't the place for this. We don't appreciate being misrepresented." No apology. No explanation. Just that. My dad chimed in shortly after. "We don't owe anyone an account of how we manage our finances. Alia is being manipulative. This is a private family matter, and she's turning it into a public show." That's when I realized they were angry because they were embarrassed, not because they regretted anything. And they blamed me for it, for holding up a mirror to the choices they made, for ruining the polished image they'd worked so hard to maintain in the family. The rest of the family wasn't buying it. Some tried to smooth things over. Others weren't shy about expressing their disappointment. Aunt Farah, so you couldn't spare a bus ticket for your daughter, but you were sipping espresso on a balcony in Florence? Cousin Danny, this is why no one talks to you anymore. The chat went quiet again after that. But behind the scenes, my phone lit up with private messages from my parents. Pages and pages of how I had humiliated them, how I was twisting the truth, and how I needed to take responsibility for turning the family against them. Then came the final message, one that still makes my hands cold just thinking about it. "If you want to fix this, help us pay off the card bill." That would show maturity. Fix it. I was supposed to fix this? They missed my graduation. Lied about why. Used the money they claimed they didn't have to travel Europe with a cousin they treat like royalty. And now, not only did they feel entitled to my money, but they wanted me to apologize to them? The message from my father, "If you want to fix this, help us pay off the card bill." That would show maturity. Kept echoing in my mind. It wasn't just the audacity that got to me. It was the calm entitlement in his words. The way he worded it, like I had created this mess by exposing it. Like I had somehow wronged them by refusing to keep quiet. For a few minutes, I just stared at my phone. Then, very calmly, I put it down and started writing a list. Not an angry, emotional rant. A cold, detailed list. Every time they had used me. Every time they had minimized my achievements. Every time they had borrowed, taken, redirected my efforts away from my goals toward theirs or Nima's. It was longer than I expected, and by the time I reached the bottom of the page, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was clear. They wanted a resolution? I would give them one, but it wouldn't be the kind they expected. The first step in my plan wasn't anything loud or public. It was quiet, purposeful. I started with my scholarship board. I had received a partial academic scholarship from a local foundation that sometimes shared alumni stories on their website. They loved success stories, especially ones about first-generation graduates. So I reached out. I didn't share the whole scandal, just the truth, that I had worked hard through financial and emotional challenges, that I had graduated alone, and that I wanted to inspire other students who might be in similar situations. They loved it. Within a week, I was featured on their homepage in a spotlight article titled "Quiet Determination: Alia's Path to Graduation." It talked about how I worked multiple jobs, maintained a high GPA, and pushed forward without the kind of family support most people take for granted. They even used one of the graduation photos I took by myself on my phone. I almost cried when I saw it there, this small piece of validation I never got from the people who were supposed to give it freely. I didn't send the article to my parents. I knew they'd find it eventually. And they did. 3 days later, I got a message from my mom. Not angry, not sarcastic, just clipped. "We saw your little article. If you're trying to make us look bad, you succeeded." I didn't respond. A few hours later, another from my dad. You need to stop dragging us through the mud. Family is private. You're being selfish. Selfish. The word almost made me laugh out loud. I had given up so many things to keep the peace with them over the years. I had accepted so little and expected so little in return. But now I was selfish for telling my story. That's when I made my second move. I began quietly collecting every message they had sent me in the last 2 years that hinted at borrowing money, redirecting my savings, or blaming me for their choices. I had dozens of them, some through email, some texts, some even voice messages. I compiled them into a neatly organized folder on my drive. I wasn't planning to go public or anything dramatic, but I wanted them to know that I had receipts, that I was no longer the naive daughter who just swallowed it all. Then I drafted a single message. I will not be sending you money. I am not responsible for the consequences of your choices. Please do not contact me for financial assistance again. If you continue to harass or guilt me, I will take further steps. I didn't elaborate on what further steps meant. Let their imaginations fill in the blanks. I sent it to both of them. Then I blocked their numbers for the first time in my life. It wasn't easy. I stared at the screen after pressing block, and for a moment, I felt like a kid again, like I'd done something wrong and was waiting to be punished. But the punishment never came. Instead, silence settled around me like a soft blanket. The silence didn't last forever, because the family chat woke up again. Apparently, after I blocked them, my parents had begun reaching out to extended relatives, spinning the story, saying I had turned on them, humiliated them, cut them off after everything they'd done for me. But this time, the family didn't fall for it. That article, the one on the scholarship website, had already made the rounds. Some relatives had read between the lines. Others had outright asked me what was going on. I told the truth, not to smear them, just to finally say it. I invited them to my graduation. They told me they couldn't afford it. They were in Europe during the ceremony. I found out from Nima's videos. And now they're asking me to pay off their trip. I included screenshots, a few voice clips, nothing inflammatory, just evidence. Most of my aunts and uncles were quiet after that. A few apologized on their behalf, awkwardly. A couple were clearly horrified and didn't try to hide it. Then came the real twist. One of my cousins, Lala, messaged me privately. She had just turned 20 and was still living at home, 2 blocks from my parents. "Hey, I don't want to stir things up," she wrote, "but your mom's been talking about you at her book club, saying you're bitter and ungrateful and that you're spreading lies about them." I thanked her. And again, I didn't react publicly. But I made another quiet decision. For years, I had been the designated family babysitter, tutor, and tech helper. I had driven across town in the rain to help my mom fix her printer. I had designed the invitations for Nima's failed clothing line launch party. I had rewritten my dad's resume. I had shown up again and again. No more. That weekend, I wrote individual messages to every relative I had ever helped. They were polite, kind, but firm. "Hi. I wanted to let you know that going forward, I'll be stepping back from family favors and responsibilities. I'm focusing on myself and setting clearer boundaries. I appreciate your understanding." The responses varied. Some were sweet. Some were confused. 1 or 2 sent nothing at all. But the most telling thing? Not a single one argued with me, which told me everything I needed to know. Even they had seen how much I gave. They just got used to it, the same way my parents had. My final step was the one I had waited for. I logged into my private social media account, the one I barely used except for close friends, and posted a video. Just a short one. A pan across my quiet living room, my framed degree in the background, the bouquet I bought for myself on the table. I added a caption. "Graduated alone. Built everything alone. Still standing." It wasn't for attention. It was a statement. And this time, I tagged no one. But Nima saw it. Because 2 days later, he posted a reel. I'm on a couch, playing video games, sighing dramatically, saying, "Some people just don't know how to let go of the past." His comments were limited. I didn't respond, because I didn't need to. About a month after I posted the video to my private social media account, I got an email I hadn't expected, but it ended up being the final piece in all of this. The subject line read, "Alumni Speaker Opportunity, Fall Graduation." It was from the department chair at my university. She'd seen the article the Scholarship Foundation had published and said she'd been moved by my story, how I had overcome personal and financial obstacles and still completed my graduate program with distinction. They were inviting me to give the keynote speech at the upcoming fall graduation ceremony. When I read that email, I sat still for a long time. Not because I was unsure about saying yes, but because it felt like everything had come full circle. I had walked the stage alone just months ago, feeling invisible. Now, I'd returned to that same stage, not as a student, but as a speaker, as someone seen. I accepted, of course, but I didn't tell my parents. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because they didn't deserve to be there. They had made it clear where their priorities were. I wasn't going to give them another seat to a moment they never valued in the first place. I poured my heart into writing the speech. I didn't make it about them. I didn't need to. I talked about perseverance, about building a future when the people you thought would support you simply don't, about creating your own kind of celebration when no one shows up. I didn't use their names, but I knew they'd feel it eventually. Because once the speech was recorded and uploaded to the university's YouTube channel, it began to circulate. A few education pages reposted quotes from it. The Scholarship Foundation shared it too. Even local news picked up a clip and added subtitles. Against the odds, a quiet voice with a strong message. Then came the final blow. I got a call from an organization I had interned with during grad school. They offered me a full-time position, remote, well-paid, and best of all, with a team that respected me. It was the kind of job my parents never believed I'd get unless I followed their path, which usually meant staying silent, staying available, and putting family first, no matter how that family treated me. When I updated my LinkedIn profile and posted about the offer, congratulatory messages poured in. Some were from former classmates, some from professors, even a few from distant cousins who had watched everything quietly and were now reaching out to say they were proud of me. But then I got another kind of message. This time, it was from a relative I hadn't heard from in years, my mom's cousin Roya. She was polite but direct. Just thought you should know, your parents are trying to get sympathy from extended family, telling people you've cut them off without cause. But most of us have seen the article and the graduation speech, and now your new job post. No one believes them anymore. I'm sorry they've made you the villain in their story. But you're not. They are. I read that last line over and over. They are. It felt like the universe was finally shifting back into balance. For once, I wasn't the one being guilt, manipulated, or asked to sacrifice. I was just living my life. Freely. Without them. That was 3 months ago. Since then, the silence has become permanent. I haven't heard from either of my parents. Not a call, not a letter, not a forwarded message through a cousin. At first, I thought it might be another manipulation tactic. Wait long enough and I'll feel guilty and come crawling back. But I never did. And I won't. I found out from a cousin that they ended up having to take out a loan to pay off their trip expenses. The credit card company had closed their account. Nima has moved back in with them full-time, and from what I've heard, the atmosphere in their house is tense. My dad tried to host a family barbecue recently, and only 2 people showed up. Their image is crumbling, and they know it. And still, they haven't apologized. Because they don't think they did anything wrong. But that's the thing. I've stopped waiting for an apology. I've stopped hoping they'll change. Because I finally realized, after years of disappointment, that some people will never see the damage they've done. Not because they can't, but because they won't. So where does that leave me? I live in a small but warm apartment in the city now. My new job lets me work from home or from cafes with good lighting and quiet corners. I've started saving, really saving, for the first time in my life, and this time, no one can touch that account but me. I'm still in touch with a few cousins, the ones who reached out, the ones who saw. I've built a small circle of friends who've become like chosen family. They show up, they listen, and they celebrate the little things with me. Things my parents never even noticed. Most nights, I don't think about my parents at all. When I do, it's with clarity, not bitterness. I don't wish them harm. I just don't wish to have them near me anymore. Because the truth is, you can love someone from a distance, but you can also protect yourself from them. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't shouting or fighting or trying to prove them wrong. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is quietly, steadily, building the life they never believed you could, without them. And that's exactly what I've done. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. I was setting down the dessert I brought, this fancy raspberry cheesecake I spent all afternoon perfecting, when my dad looked around the room, scanned the table like he was checking for roaches, then said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, I guess someone had to invite the failure." A few relatives smirked. My cousin Tyler actually chuckled. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I just took my seat at the far end of the table, folded my hands, and waited. Because what they didn't realize, what not one of them knew, was that tonight wasn't going to end the way they expected. My name's Brian. I'm 31, and for the first time in 6 years, I agreed to attend one of my family's big dinners. Those awkward, passive-aggressive, overly decorated evenings my mom insists on throwing for every minor holiday, like it's a presidential gala. This one was for her birthday, actually, November 8th. A date I used to remember fondly until it became just another excuse for my dad to play ringmaster to our dysfunctional little circus. You should know, I didn't just show up out of the blue. My younger sister, Melissa, had been calling and texting me for weeks, begging me to come. "It's just dinner," she kept saying. "Just come, eat, say hi, please." She's one of the few people in the family who actually treats me like a human being, and I could hear the guilt in her voice every time she brought it up. So eventually, I gave in. Told her I'd come for her. Just dinner, just this once. I didn't expect anything to have changed. And I was right. The moment I stepped through the front door, I knew I'd made a mistake. The house smelled the same, like lavender potpourri and expensive candles that tried too hard. Same piano music playing softly from the speakers. Same old judgmental faces turning toward me like I was a stray dog that wandered in. Even the way my mom greeted me felt hollow. She came over all smiles, arms outstretched, kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "Try not to stir anything up tonight, okay?" Before she turned to greet Aunt Janice and acted like I didn't exist. The only reason I brought that cheesecake was because I wanted to contribute something nice. I figured if I was going to be judged, I might as well give them something to judge me for. I even skipped lunch to make sure I had time to chill it properly before driving an hour and a half to get there. No one thanked me when I walked in with it. Not a single person even acknowledged it, until Dad made that little comment. Guess someone had to invite the failure. Just loud enough to float across the table like a balloon filled with poison. The silence afterward was deafening, in that way that tells you everyone heard it, everyone knew it was wrong, but no one was going to say anything about it. That's the kind of house I grew up in, where silence was complicity, and complicity was just another way of surviving. I didn't react. Not then. I just sat down and smiled to myself. Because this time, I didn't come back to play nice. I didn't come back to let them push me around or talk down to me or pretend I wasn't worth the chair I was sitting in. This time, I came back with something they didn't know I had. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why that line from my dad didn't even faze me anymore, you'd have to understand how many times I've heard some version of it. Growing up, he had this way of making you feel small without ever raising his voice. He was the king of disappointed sighs and sarcastic nods. My older brother Kevin was always the achiever, business degree, shiny company car, the kind of guy who posted motivational quotes on LinkedIn. Melissa was the peacemaker, sweet, agreeable, always going along to get along. And then there was me, the artsy one, the drifter, the one who dropped out of law school and dared to build something on his own terms. What they never understood, what they refused to understand, was that I wasn't some lazy burnout. I was building something real, quietly, privately, away from their judgmental stares and behind-the-back whispers. I was running my own tech consulting firm. Nothing flashy, no office downtown, but steady, profitable, grown from the ground up over the last 6 years. But because I didn't wear a suit or show up to family functions with business cards, they assumed I was unemployed. Or worse, just lost. I stopped trying to explain myself a long time ago, because every time I tried, it turned into a lecture. You know you're not getting any younger. It's not too late to go back to school. Kevin's company might have an entry-level spot if you're serious this time. So I stopped coming around. It wasn't just the judgment. It was the way they all seemed to enjoy it. Like my failures made them feel better about themselves. Like watching me struggle was some kind of family pastime. But Melissa kept calling, kept reminding me she missed me. That the kids, her kids, wanted to see Uncle Brian again. So I finally said yes. And that brings us back to the table. That long, polished wood table surrounded by perfectly folded napkins and overpriced wine glasses, where I sat with a polite smile as Dad made me the butt of his opening joke. Kevin, of course, was already holding court at the other end, telling some story about how he handled a difficult client with his usual brand of fake humility. "Oh, it was nothing really," he said, lifting his wine glass. "You just have to know how to talk to these people." Mom was hanging on every word. Uncle Dean nodded along like Kevin had just shared the secret to world peace. And I sat there, invisible, until my dad decided to pull me into the spotlight with that line. Someone had to invite the failure. But I didn't give him the reaction he wanted. No flushed cheeks. No nervous laugh. I just waited. Because the night was young. And the longer I stayed quiet, the more they'd underestimate me. Melissa gave me a sympathetic smile from across the table, but she didn't speak up either. I didn't blame her. She's been the middle child her whole life. Keeping the peace is practically her religion. As the evening went on, the digs kept coming, soft ones at first. My aunt leaned over and asked, "So are you still doing that computer thing?" My cousin Jason chimed in later with, "You know, my buddy tried the whole freelancing thing. Didn't really work out. Tough market out there." Every comment was laced with the same syrupy condescension, and I just kept nodding, smiling, sipping my drink. I had no intention of defending myself, because I had a better plan. One that would unravel slowly, like a thread in a sweater. One that would force them to see me not just as the failure, but as something else entirely. And by the time dessert came out, they'd wish they had treated me differently from the start. But first, I had to let them talk. So I stayed quiet, and they didn't even realize the stage they were setting, until it was too late. Dinner dragged on in the slow, torturous way that only family dinners can, where every minute feels like 10, and every conversation feels like it's being sharpened into a weapon. The room was warm, heavy with the scent of roast chicken, garlic potatoes, and strained politeness. Laughter bubbled up from the other end of the table like bad champagne. Too forced, too loud. I sat at the far end, nodding at all the right times, but mostly just listening. Watching. Waiting. By the time we reached the main course, the digs had evolved. They weren't just passive-aggressive anymore. They were getting bold. Kevin, in particular, seemed to be having a great time at my expense. "So, Brian," he said, swirling his wine with the smugness of a man who practiced his smirk in the mirror. "Still living in that apartment over the mechanic shop? What is it, 700 square feet?" Melissa stiffened. I caught her eye, but gave her the slightest shake of my head. "Don't defend me. Not yet." I smiled. "It's actually 650. Keeps me humble." Kevin snorted. "Guess it saves on heating when your entire place is one room." The laughter was louder this time. Aunt Janice actually slapped the table. Even my mom cracked a smile, though she tried to cover it with her napkin. It was surreal, like watching my own humiliation be passed around like a side dish. I could feel the weight of every stare, every unspoken comparison. Kevin, in his custom blazer and Rolex, held court like a king. I was the jester, the cautionary tale. No matter what I did or how hard I worked, they had already written my role in the family script, and they weren't interested in a rewrite. Brian's always been more of a free spirit, my mom offered at one point, in that tight, sugary voice she used when she wanted to sound supportive but still remind everyone I was a disappointment. "Yeah," Dad added, buttering a roll with surgical precision, free from ambition, free from success, free from basic financial planning. More laughter. I stared at the tablecloth, at the little patterns stitched into it like vines choking a tree. My grip tightened on my fork. The whole room felt like it was closing in. Not one person had asked me how I was doing. Not one person had shown interest in my life, my work, or anything beyond what they could mock. I wasn't even angry at that point. I was just tired. But then it got worse. After dinner, we migrated to the living room for coffee and dessert, my cheesecake. I had brought it out myself, placed it neatly in the center of the buffet table, cut clean slices. It looked perfect. It was perfect. I watched as my mom took a piece, paused, then leaned toward Aunt Janice. "I missed the store-bought one we had last year," she whispered, not quietly enough. I said nothing, just took my slice and sat down. Melissa sat beside me, murmuring, "I'm so sorry, Bree. They're being awful." "It's okay," I said softly. "This is what they do." She shook her head. "You don't deserve it." I didn't respond, because just then, Kevin's voice cut through the room. "We should do gifts now. I got Mom something special." Of course he did. Everyone gathered around as he presented her with a sleek little box from some high-end boutique. She gasped and fawned as she unwrapped a bracelet, gold, with a tiny charm shaped like a key. "For the key to my heart," he said, loud enough for it to be rehearsed. She clutched it to her chest like he'd donated a kidney. "Oh, Kevin," she cooed. "You always know just what I like." I looked down at my hands. They felt heavy. I hadn't brought a gift, just the cheesecake. And apparently, even that wasn't good enough. The next part felt like something out of a script I didn't audition for. My dad cleared his throat. "Actually, while we're all here, I wanted to talk about something important." The room quieted. Everyone turned. "I've been working on my will," he said, smiling thinly. "Nothing morbid, just being practical. I thought it might be nice to let everyone know where things stand, now that we're all," he paused, glancing at me, "together again." I felt my stomach turn cold. "What?" He leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the attention. "So, the house will go to Kevin and his family. It makes the most sense, since they've always been close by. The lake cabin will go to Melissa. God knows she's kept that place alive. And the business, well, Kevin's been shadowing me for years, so he'll take over once I'm gone." The room broke into soft applause, nods, approval, like it was some sort of award ceremony. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My ears were ringing. "And Brian," he added, almost as an afterthought, "you'll get the Mustang." The Mustang. The rusted-out, half-functioning 1967 Mustang he'd been restoring for 15 years. Everyone chuckled. A few even clapped, like it was a joke. Melissa looked at me, horror in her eyes. I just nodded, slowly. It wasn't about the money. I didn't need the house, or the cabin, or the business. I had my own. I had more than they could ever imagine. But it wasn't about the material. It was the message. The utter, deliberate dismissal of my worth. The public humiliation. The fact that they made it a spectacle. The Mustang. That was the breaking point. That's when something inside me shifted. Not snapped. Not exploded. Shifted. Like a lens suddenly coming into focus. Because up until that moment, I had planned to stay quiet. I had planned to leave without saying anything. To let them think what they wanted, because their approval never paid my bills or made me happy. But now I realized that sometimes silence isn't noble. Sometimes silence just lets people keep thinking they're right. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like staying silent. I stood up. The room went quiet. I wasn't dramatic about it. I didn't clear my throat or clink a glass. I just stood and looked around the room slowly, making eye contact with every single person who had laughed, dismissed, or ignored me that night. Then I turned to my dad. "Thank you for the Mustang," I said, my voice calm. "I'll put it next to my Lamborghini." He blinked, confused. "What? Or maybe I'll just sell it. I could use the extra room in the garage. Gets tight with 3 cars. Kevin snorted. "What are you even talking about?" I turned to him, smile still in place. "The cars I bought. With the money I make. From the business I own. You know, the one you all keep calling freelance." That's when the room really went silent. Because I never talked about it. Not once. Not on social media. Not in passing. I kept everything quiet. On purpose. "I didn't come here to brag," I said. "But since we're handing out trophies and carving up legacies, let me just clear something up. I'm not a failure. I don't live above a mechanic's shop. That's a temporary studio I rented while my house in Seattle finishes construction. The house I bought, in cash, last year, after my company cleared 7 figures. A beat. Wait," Kevin said slowly. "You're joking." I pulled out my phone, opened the real estate app, showed him the listing, the price tag, the sold banner. "I don't need your approval," I said. "I never did. I just wanted to see if you'd treat me any differently if you thought I had less than you." I turned to my dad. "You can keep the Mustang." And then I walked out. Or at least I would have. If Melissa hadn't stopped me at the door. "Wait," she whispered. "Brian, wait." Her eyes were wide, her face pale. And then she glanced back at the living room, at our stunned parents, our gaping relatives, and Kevin, who looked like someone had just punched him in the throat. "You can't leave yet," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because Mom didn't tell you what she said before dinner," she said quietly. "About your cheesecake." I frowned. "Yeah, I heard." "No, not that part." She swallowed. "She told Kevin not to worry," Melissa said. "Because tonight, she was going to make sure you finally stayed out of the will." I stood there in the hallway, Melissa's words ricocheting around my skull like a loose screw in a tin can. Mom told Kevin she was going to make sure you stayed out of the will. The air around me felt thick, heavy, like something invisible had been pressing down on my chest this whole evening, and I'd finally realized what it was. I wasn't just excluded. I wasn't just dismissed. They wanted me to fail. They needed it. It made them feel righteous, superior, like their choices were justified, like staying in line, marrying safe, and obeying every family expectation had somehow won. I guess someone had to invite the failure. And if you don't have one, you make one. I didn't go back into that living room. I didn't demand an explanation or start a scene. I didn't yell or cry or slam the door. I just nodded to Melissa, gave her a small smile, and said, "Thanks for telling me." Then I walked out into the cold November air, cheesecake still sitting untouched on the table, surrounded by people who never really knew me and never cared to. The drive back to my place was quiet. Not just outside, but inside. No music. No thoughts. Just silence. Not the peaceful kind, either. The kind that sits in your chest like wet cement. I stared ahead at the dark road, the taillights, the faint reflection of my own face in the windshield, and kept replaying it over and over. I shouldn't have gone. I should have known better. And the worst part was, I did know better. I just hoped this time might be different. That maybe years of distance and growth and success would have changed something. Anything. It hadn't. If anything, they resented me more for not needing them. And it wasn't until I pulled into the gravel driveway behind my temporary studio that it really hit me. I had no one. Not in the traditional sense, anyway. My parents clearly saw me as a burden, or worse, an embarrassment. Kevin saw me as a punchline. Most of the extended family followed their lead. Melissa was the only one who ever made an effort, and I knew, deep down, she'd always be split between loyalty and survival. So yeah, rock bottom. That night was pretty close. I didn't sleep much. Just sat on the edge of my bed with the light off, staring at the faint outline of that damn Mustang poster my dad gave me years ago when he used to be proud of me. "One day we'll fix up the real thing together," he'd said. He never meant it. The car sat in his garage for 15 years, gathering dust. Just like any hope of fatherly pride. I let go of something that night. Something that needed to die. I stopped chasing approval. And in its place, I started something else. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just purpose. A quiet kind of fire. In the weeks that followed, I turned inward. Not in the sad, self-pitying way. I focused. I threw myself into my work like it was the only thing keeping me upright. And maybe it was. I stopped trying to keep tabs on the family. I muted the group chat. I unfollowed Kevin. I let calls from Mom go to voicemail. And every time I felt that familiar tug, the guilt, the need to explain myself, I reminded myself what they actually thought of me. Failure. I poured that energy into my company. For context, I run a back-end security consultancy. It's not flashy. I don't wear a suit or speak on panels. I work with medium-sized companies that are growing fast and terrified of data breaches. I'd built it slowly over the past 6 years, first as a freelancer, then as a two-man team, and eventually into a remote crew of 10. It was always sustainable, but after that dinner, I wanted more. I needed more. So I scaled. Hard. I restructured our pricing models. Picked up 2 enterprise clients. Hired a marketing lead. Doubled our monthly revenue by the end of Q1. The Mustang jokes turned into fuel. The freelancer, Snipes, became a scoreboard. Every time I closed a deal, I thought of my dad buttering his roll and calling me free from ambition. And it wasn't just business. I started rebuilding me. I bought a gym membership. Not because I suddenly wanted six-pack abs, but because I needed discipline, something physical to go with the mental. I stopped eating like a raccoon at midnight. Cut back on the coffee. Started going on long, silent walks after dinner. No phone, just my thoughts. I unfollowed anyone on social media who made me feel small or bitter or envious. I didn't need to watch other people live their lives. I was building my own. One of the first real moments of clarity came during a random Tuesday Zoom call. I was pitching a custom firewall package to a prospective client, a mid-sized e-commerce platform with a bad history of plug-and-play solutions. I walked them through the architecture, explained the vulnerabilities they hadn't noticed, and laid out a 3-month roadmap. When I finished, the CEO leaned back, smiled, and said, "This is the most confident presentation we've seen. You clearly know your stuff." And I believed him. For the first time in years, I actually believed someone who complimented me. Because he had no reason to lie. He didn't know my history, didn't have a stake in my family drama. He didn't want to prop me up or tear me down. He just saw me for what I was. That deal closed. So did the next one. By summer, my company had doubled again. I upgraded my workspace, moved out of the apartment above the mechanic shop into a sleek industrial loft downtown. I designed every inch of it myself. Clean, minimalist. Walls painted a soft charcoal gray with deep walnut desks and large framed prints of vintage blueprints. Every corner of that place felt like mine. And then came the call. Late August. Warm evening. I just poured myself a drink when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. Brian, honey, Mom said on the other end. Her voice syrupy again. It's been too long. It always starts like that. I said nothing. Just waited. We're having a little family get-together next month. Nothing big. Just dinner. I thought, maybe you'd like to come. I stared out the window at the skyline, watching the lights flicker across the buildings like a silent orchestra. Why? I asked. She hesitated. What do you mean? I mean, last time I came to dinner, I was called a failure. Publicly. And then you announced you were cutting me out of the will. More silence. That was a misunderstanding, she said quickly. Your father was just joking. No, he wasn't. Well, she sighed, that's just how he is. You know that. Don't be so sensitive. There it was. The dismissal. The gaslighting. The reminder that I was the problem for reacting, not them for attacking. I almost hung up, but then something inside me clicked. All right, I said. I'll come. A beat. You will. Sure. It'll be nice to catch up. I hung up before she could say anything else. Then I poured myself another drink, leaned back in my chair, and started drafting a plan. Because I wasn't going just to eat their roast chicken and pretend we were one big happy family. I was going to show them what a real legacy looks like. The invitation came 2 weeks later in the form of a Facebook event titled Family Appreciation Dinner, hosted by Carol and Frank. That's my mom and dad. It was classic Carol. She tried to make it sound like some wholesome community event, not the stiff, ego-driven family dinner I knew it would be. The kind of night where everyone brought dishes but only certain people were thanked, where accomplishments were toasted if they fit the family narrative, and where anyone who didn't show up with a smile and a story about how great Kevin was got talked about like a tragic case study. I stared at the event page for a while. The RSVP list was exactly what I expected. Kevin and his wife, of course, Uncle Dean and Aunt Janice, Cousin Tyler, Melissa, and her husband Tom, even distant relatives I hadn't seen in 5 years. And at the bottom, a little going next to my name. I hadn't clicked it. Mom had. Cute. But it didn't matter. I was already planning to attend. Only this time, I wasn't walking in with a cheesecake and quiet hopes for civility. This time, I was walking in with intention. The first thing I did was call Melissa. She picked up on the second ring. Brian. Hey, I said. Got a minute? Yeah, of course. What's up? I got the invite. There was a pause. Then, I was hoping you wouldn't see it. I leaned back in my chair, tapping the edge of my desk. Why? Because I know what they're doing. Mom's been talking about you more lately. Too much. It's weird. Like she's trying to act like nothing happened. Like they didn't trash you in front of everyone. I smiled. Melissa was sharp when she wasn't busy walking on eggshells. I think they're trying to reel me back in, I said. They don't like that I'm separate now. You mean successful? Sure, I said. That too. There was another pause. So what are you going to do? I glanced at the blueprint hanging above my desk. My company's network structure. 10 nodes, for secure clients, 2 under audit. I'm going to play along, I said. Smile. Sit through dinner. Let them pretend I'm family again. And then I'm going to turn the lights on. Brian. Not like that. I said quickly. I'm not burning anything down. I just want to rearrange the furniture a little. She laughed, nervous, but genuine. You're cryptic when you're plotting. Only when it's fun. Melissa hesitated. Can I help? That made me pause. She'd always been neutral ground. Switzerland in a sweater. But in that moment, she sounded like someone who was tired of covering for people. Someone who finally wanted to pick a side. Actually, I said slowly, yeah, you can. And just like that, I had an ally. Step 1 was simple. Information. I needed to know what I was walking into. Who would be there, what the seating would look like, what kind of celebration they were staging. Melissa sent me a photo of the group chat the next day, where Mom had outlined everything down to the centerpiece flowers and the font for the printed menu. Yes, there was a menu. Kevin, of course, was giving a speech. A few words of reflection and appreciation for the family's legacy, as Mom put it. There was also a slideshow planned, photos pulled from family albums, holiday cards, and apparently Kevin's wedding. Mine wasn't mentioned. Not that I expected it to be. They'd conveniently forgotten that chapter years ago. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't a dinner. It was a coronation. Kevin was being publicly named the future patriarch, the next leader of the family. Dad was going to pass him the torch, probably in the form of some speech about tradition and responsibility, maybe even hand him the keys to the lake cabin in some performative gesture. And I was expected to be there, smiling in the corner, silent and grateful just to be included. I'd seen enough. Step 2. Timing. I had 3 weeks. 3 weeks to prepare something that wouldn't just make a statement, but shift the ground beneath them. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. Because here's the truth. I didn't want revenge just to get even. I wanted to expose the rot. Not by yelling. Not by accusing. By holding up a mirror. So I made a few calls. The first was to my friend Julian, a software engineer I used to work with before I launched my own company. He now ran a boutique AV consulting firm and had helped me design the secure media rooms for 3 of my clients. Tell me something, I asked. How hard would it be to set up a wireless audio relay in a private residence? He paused. Legal or hypothetical? I smiled. Let's say, family dinner. I want to listen to what they say when I'm not in the room. Ah, he said. Old school eavesdropping. Should be easy. What? Just want to confirm something I already know. Julian was in. And so was the tech. Step 3. Proof. It wasn't enough to show up with a speech or some receipts. That would make me look defensive. Paranoid, even. I needed the truth to come out without me forcing it. I needed them to reveal themselves. So Melissa helped me plan it. A discreet lav mic under the drinks cabinet in the living room, connected to a tiny transmitter in the vent. No one noticed. No one ever does when the lighting's cozy and the wine's flowing. We tested it 3 days before the event. Crystal clear. I told Melissa to let the conversations flow naturally. If they talked about me, especially if it was anything like last time, I'd have it. And I did. 2 nights before the dinner, I received the full audio file. 3 hours of casual cruelty. Mom, just smile and be nice to him. He doesn't need to know we're changing the trust. Dad, it's not like he'd understand it anyway. Kid couldn't even finish law school. Kevin, we're doing him a favor, really. He'd just waste the money. Probably on one of his startups. Aunt Janice. Honestly, I think he likes being the underdog. Gives him something to sulk about. Uncle Dean. Well, he better not cause a scene. Carol's already nervous he'll try to turn the dinner into a therapy session. I sat in silence for 10 full minutes after listening. Not out of shock. Out of clarity. This was who they were. This was the story they told themselves to justify every exclusion, every jab, every seat at the table I wasn't offered. And now? Now I had proof. Step 4. Stagecraft. I emailed the AV company I use for my client events and had them deliver a portable setup. Hidden speakers, smart projector, wireless controller, all routed through a secure hub in my backpack. It looked like nothing more than a laptop sleeve. I tested it in my loft the day before the dinner. Smooth. Seamless. The final piece was the slideshow. The one Mom had been preparing, full of carefully selected photos of family legacy. Kevin in a cap and gown. Kevin with his wife. Kevin holding Dad's hand at the cabin like they were passing down a throne. Melissa got me access. I found the file on Mom's laptop, she said. It's awful. It's like you don't even exist. I wasn't surprised, but I had an idea. Send it to me, I said, and make sure they don't touch it again before the dinner. She paused. What are you going to do? Just making a few edits. By the time I finished, the slideshow looked identical. Same photos, same music, same timeline. But buried inside, every 8th slide was quietly replaced with something else. A quote, a bank statement, a contract, a screenshot of a public Forbes article referencing my work on a secure communications framework, images of my Seattle property, my team's Christmas photo. Nothing flashy, just undeniable. Proof that I existed. Proof that I thrived. By the time the dinner rolled around, I was ready. I showed up in a charcoal wool blazer and a navy crew neck. No tie, no labels. Clean. Confident. I carried nothing but a sleek backpack and a bottle of wine from a vineyard I owned a share in. The house looked the same. Same potted plants. Same lavender scent. Same carefully coordinated chaos. Mom greeted me like nothing had ever happened. Air kiss. Fake smile. Brian, sweetie. So glad you could make it. Kevin offered a nod, like we were business associates who once shared a bad lunch. I smiled at everyone, because I already knew how the night would end. They sat me at the far end of the dining table again. Same chair. Same linen napkin. Same passive-aggressive smile from Mom as she handed me the printed menu like I should be grateful just to be breathing the same air as her chosen heir. Kevin was already 2 glasses of wine in, flashing that polished smile of his, the one that never reached his eyes. He looked relaxed, comfortable, like someone who already knew how the night would end. Why wouldn't he? He'd been handed everything. Dad's praise, Mom's affection, the lake cabin, the future of the family business, and now, tonight, the symbolic crown. Only this time, he wasn't the only one who came prepared. Dinner went about how I expected. Forced conversation. Polite chuckles. Melissa across the table giving me subtle glances to make sure I was still breathing. I stayed quiet, played my role, laughed at the appropriate times, and asked Cousin Tyler about his new job. He said something about real estate marketing and then pivoted into a backhanded compliment about how Brian's probably great at websites and stuff. Sure, Tyler. After the 3rd course, Mom stood and clinked her glass, smiling that brittle, over-rehearsed smile she always used when trying to control a room. Everyone, she said, thank you for being here. This evening is very special to us. Not just because we get to have our whole family together, a small glance toward me, but because we're also marking an important chapter, a new beginning. She gestured toward Kevin. Frank and I have talked a lot about legacy, about family, and we're so proud of everything our son has become. She was glowing. Kevin did that slow, humble head nod thing he probably practiced in the mirror. The whole table clapped, like it was his graduation all over again. Dad stood next. Kevin's been by my side for years now. He stepped up. He understands responsibility. And we think it's time he take on more, formally. So tonight, we're passing the torch. Starting with this. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. The kind you only use when something needs to feel important. These, he said, are the title transfer documents for the lake cabin. Kevin stood up, pretending to be surprised. Dad, seriously? Mom nodded. You've earned it. Kevin opened the envelope, holding it like it was the 10 Commandments. I could see Melissa tense beside her husband. She glanced at me again, like asking, is this it? I gave her the smallest nod. Let it happen. Let the stage rise just a bit higher. Let the throne settle under him. They finished their little coronation with more clapping, a round of toasts, and the announcement that Kevin would be delivering a short speech of appreciation before dessert. That was my cue. I stood up slowly, lifting my glass. I actually brought something too, I said calmly, tapping the side of the wine glass for attention. Before Kevin speaks. Heads turned. Some confused. Some suspicious. Dad narrowed his eyes slightly, but said nothing. Kevin looked amused. Something simple. I continued. Just a few memories. I figured, if we're celebrating family legacy, it might be nice to remember where we all came from. Mom blinked. What are you talking about? I reached into my bag and pulled out the slim remote, clicked it once, and the living room wall lit up with the projector I had set up earlier, hidden behind the sideboard cabinet. The slideshow started automatically. Soft piano music played. First few slides were exactly what they expected. Baby photos. Family barbecues. Kevin at his high school graduation. Melissa holding her firstborn. Laughter. Smiles. Nostalgia. Everyone relaxed. Then came slide 9. A quote in white letters against a black screen. Just smile and be nice to him. He doesn't need to know we're changing the trust. Carol. The room froze. At first, no one said anything. Maybe they thought it was a mistake. A misquote. But the next slide sealed it. A time-stamped audio waveform. Beneath it, text read. It's not like he'd understand it anyway. Kid couldn't even finish law school. Frank. Kevin stood abruptly. What is this? I clicked again. Slide 11. A high-res screenshot of a transcript. Audio pulled from the very conversation 2 nights before, crystal clear, Dad's voice unmistakable. Then Mom's. Then Kevin's. Every insult. Every betrayal. We're doing him a favor, really. He'd just waste the money. Gasps now. Aunt Janice whispering, oh my God, while Melissa covered her mouth. Her husband Tom just stared straight ahead, frozen. Mom's voice trembled. Brian, what is this? I met her eyes. The truth. Next slide. A simple collage of headlines from business sites, articles referencing my company's growth, contracts signed, awards granted. My name, Brian Caldwell, founder and CEO, Vigil SEC Technologies, in bold letters across a TechCrunch piece. Then a slide showing the interior of my Seattle home. Zillow screenshots. Purchase records. All public. All real. Then a photo of me and my team in front of our downtown office. The date in the corner, March 3rd, 2 weeks after the dinner where I was called a failure. And then, quiet. Just the music playing. I clicked one final time. The screen went black. One last quote. He's not the failure. You are. Future me. I set the remote down and let the silence stretch. Kevin looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. Dad's face had gone pale, his mouth a thin, angry line. Mom just stared at the screen like it had personally betrayed her. Aunt Janice was the first to speak. Carol, is that real? Mom opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. It was taken out of context. Melissa scoffed. Loudly. No, she said. It wasn't. All eyes turned to her. She asked me not to tell Brian. Melissa said, standing up. She told Kevin before the last dinner that they were cutting Brian out completely. Not because he needed to be. Not because he did anything wrong. Just because it made them feel better. Kevin shook his head, his voice rising. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do, Melissa snapped. I heard all of it. I helped plant the mic. Kevin's mouth clamped shut. Dad finally spoke, his voice low and tight. This is manipulative. You're trying to humiliate us. No, I said. I'm trying to show you what humiliation feels like. I looked at each of them. Because that's what you've been doing to me for years. Quietly, publicly, jokingly, strategically. You made me the family's cautionary tale. You needed me to fail to justify everything you gave Kevin. And I let it happen. I stayed away. I stayed silent. But not anymore. I turned to Kevin. You're not the legacy. You're just loud. Then to Dad. You say I have no ambition. But I built something from scratch that you don't even understand. And finally to Mom. You said I wouldn't notice. That I didn't need to know. But I did. And now everyone else does too. I picked up my wine glass, took a slow sip, and smiled. Oh, and by the way, I added, about the lake cabin, you might want to check the deed. Dad blinked. What are you talking about? I bought the land 2 months ago. Neighbor was selling. It borders your east property line. Turns out the old survey was wrong. That doc you love so much. It's on my land now. Gasps. Kevin stepped forward. You're lying. I pulled out the printed map and dropped it on the table. County clerk approved it last week. Want me to call them? Silence. Then Melissa started clapping. Slow. Sarcastic. Cathartic. One by one, a few others joined. Not everyone, but enough. I looked around the room, at the faces that used to make me feel small. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need anything from them anymore. I turned to Melissa. You coming? She nodded without hesitation. Tom stood too. They gathered their things while Mom sat in stunned silence. The slideshow frozen behind her on the quote. He's not the failure. You are. I walked out of that house with my sister by my side and a quiet pride in my chest. The kind that doesn't need applause, or inheritance, or forgiveness. Just freedom. We got into my car. Yes, the real one. And drove off into the night. The taillights glowing behind us like 2 small fires burning everything I left behind. And I never looked back. My sister got a fancy car for graduating top of her class. When I checked my surprise, it was a note saying they had lost faith in me. It's time you face reality, my mom told me. I walked out and didn't return. A month later, they called, begging. We were wrong. Please come back. Hey Reddit, I'm Evan, 24M, and I'm still not totally sure how to even begin explaining this mess of a story. It's been building for years, but it finally came to a head last month in a way that I don't think I'll ever forget, or fully forgive. I've been replaying the whole thing over and over in my head, wondering if I could have seen it coming. I want to believe most families have their issues, misunderstandings, growing pains, differences in values. But mine has a way of pretending everything's fine while quietly letting disappointment stew under the surface. And that disappointment? Yeah, most of it was aimed at me. So let me give you the lay of the land. My mom, Teresa, is 52. She's the type of woman who makes a spreadsheet for holiday meals and sends out family newsletters that nobody asked for. Her whole identity is wrapped up in appearances, what people think of her family, her house, her children. But the thing is, she's not loud about it. She's soft-spoken, always smiling, always polite. It's only when you really listen to her that you realize how loaded her words can be. My dad, Mark, is 55. He's more distant, not much of a talker. He's the kind of guy who will spend an entire dinner playing a game on his phone, then look up once just to say something like, "Back in my day, we didn't get trophies for trying." And that's it. That's his whole contribution. Unless something really bothers him. And then he gets cold in a way that freezes the whole room. Then there's my sister Callie, 22F. She's 2 years younger than me. And if my parents were architects designing their dream child, it would be her. From the time she was in middle school, everything she did got framed like an achievement. Honor roll? Check. Dance team? Check. She got into a competitive university on a scholarship and studied biomedical engineering, which made her practically mythological in my mom's eyes. I'm the oldest, and apparently, I was the test run. I'm not a failure, not really. But I've never been who they wanted me to be. In high school, I was quiet. Not shy exactly, just off in my own head. I liked drawing, storytelling, animation. While Callie was out at sports banquets and science fairs, I was holed up in my room teaching myself how to use digital art software and editing clips for fun. I wasn't a bad student, just average. B's, sometimes C's. I went to a small liberal arts college because it seemed like the thing to do, but by the end of my third semester, I realized I was wasting time and money. Dropping out wasn't a spontaneous decision. I thought about it for weeks. I even tried to talk to my parents about it before I did it. My mom's response: "You're just going through a phase. You'll grow out of it." My dad didn't say much at first. Then one night, when I was packing up to leave campus, he came into my room and said, "If you quit now, you'll always be a quitter." And that was that. After I moved back home, things changed. Subtly, but permanently. My parents never screamed or kicked me out, but they stopped asking about my day. My mom started introducing me to people as our creative one, with a little half laugh, like she was apologizing for me in advance. My dad only talked to me if it was to ask if I'd applied for more jobs. Meanwhile, Callie was thriving. Every time she came home, it was like a parade. She'd bring gifts for my mom, help her cook, tell funny stories from school. My mom would beam, my dad would listen attentively, and I'd sit there pretending I wasn't fading into the wallpaper. I picked up part-time work where I could, retail, delivery, a couple of freelance gigs doing artwork for local businesses. I even got a few commissions online for character designs and animation loops. It wasn't steady yet, but it was something I was building. Slowly. Anyway, this all leads to Callie's graduation party. She had just finished her degree, top of her class, with honors. She had a job offer lined up in the city and everything. My parents decided to throw a massive celebration at the house. I mean massive. They rented a tent for the backyard, had a whole buffet catered by this Italian place my mom loves, strung up fairy lights on every tree and bush. It looked like something out of a movie. I showed up a little late. Not on purpose. I had a project due that I was trying to wrap up, but also not in a rush. I knew exactly what kind of party it was going to be. And the moment I stepped into the backyard, I could feel it. People were everywhere. Family, neighbors, old friends of my parents. My mom was glowing. She saw me come in and gave me this little wave, but didn't walk over. Callie was the center of everything, standing near the patio in a white sundress, surrounded by what looked like a small crowd of well-wishers. I tried to find a quiet spot and just blend in. I made small talk with my uncle for a bit, grabbed a soda, and stood off to the side under one of the trees. Then, about an hour in, my mom rang a little silver bell. I wish I was making that up. She rang a bell to get everyone's attention, then made a short speech. It was exactly what you'd expect. She went on about Callie's accomplishments, how proud they were, how hard she'd worked. Everyone clapped. Someone cheered. And then she said, "We have one more little surprise." She led everyone around the side of the house, to the driveway. The garage door started to lift. Behind it was a brand new white SUV with a massive red bow across the hood. People gasped. Callie's hands flew up to her mouth. My dad jingled a pair of keys and handed them to her like he was giving her a crown. It was a whole moment. Everyone was filming it, clapping, laughing, tearing up, and I just stood there, half a step behind the crowd, suddenly feeling very, very small. I wasn't mad she got the car. I want to be clear about that. She earned it. but something in me just cracked. I turned to leave, but that's when my mom called my name. Evan, wait. We have something for you too. The way she said it was strange, like she was trying too hard to sound cheerful. I hesitated, then followed her through the back door into the kitchen. She opened a drawer, took out a small white envelope, and handed it to me. There was no name on it, no decoration, just sealed shut. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No card, no money, just a handwritten note. Evan, we love you, but it's time you face reality. We've done everything we can. We need to step back now. You need to grow up. Find stability. Get serious. We believe you can, but you have to choose that for yourself. Mom and Dad. I remember staring at it for a long time before looking up. My mom was watching me like she expected a reaction. I didn't know what to say. My mouth went dry. She gave me this small, encouraging smile and said, "This is our way of helping you. You'll understand one day." I folded the note back up, put it on the counter, and left the kitchen. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just walked out the front door. I didn't go back. Not that night. Not the next day. Not since. After a whole month of silence, they've started calling. First my mom, then my dad, then, surprisingly, even Callie. And what they said, "Evan, we were wrong. Please come back. We need to talk." The first call came on a Thursday evening. I was sketching at my desk, working on a commission for this indie tabletop game designer who'd found my art through a mutual on social media. It was going to be a sprawling set of character portraits, and I'd just finished rendering the second one when my phone lit up. MOM, no message. Just a missed call. That alone was strange enough. Teresa doesn't usually call. She texts in full paragraphs, with punctuation, even for things like, "Don't forget to bring a sweater." And she never reaches out unannounced. Everything with her is scheduled, orderly. I let it go to voicemail. I figured maybe she had a question about something random, some bill I forgot to transfer to my name, or a dentist appointment she assumed I still needed her to make. A minute later, it rang again. Dad, that was even stranger. My dad calling is rare. My dad calling right after my mom. That doesn't happen. Ever. I didn't pick up. I stared at the phone, waiting to see if he'd leave a message. He did. "Evan, it's Dad. We should talk. Things have changed a little. Call me when you can." "No, hey bud. No, hope you're doing well." Just that awkward, clipped tone he uses when he's already annoyed at something and trying to act calm. I sat there, my stylus still in my hand, the screen of my tablet dimming. 2 hours passed. Then came the text. From Callie. "Hey, I know things are weird, but Mom and Dad are really shaken. Can you come home this weekend? They want to apologize." Apologize. That word landed heavier than I expected. Because in all my life, I cannot remember a single time Teresa, or Mark, for that matter, had ever said they were sorry. Not to me. Not for anything. Not when I was 12 and they made me quit art camp because Callie had a regional gymnastics meet. Not even when they called my decision to leave college an embarrassment to the family during Thanksgiving dinner. So them wanting to apologize? That didn't track, unless something had gone wrong. And that's when the little alarm in the back of my mind started going off. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I started scrolling. Callie's social media was usually a highlight reel. Graduation photos, inspirational quotes, pictures of her dog wearing seasonal bandanas. But the most recent post? It was a simple picture of her car, the white SUV with the giant red bow now long gone. Captioned, "Some things aren't meant to last. Starting over." The comments were vague. "You've got this, girl. So sorry to hear. Call me if you need anything." Wow, that's awful. You didn't deserve that. That's when I knew. Something had definitely happened. And whatever it was, it had flipped the dynamic in a way I hadn't seen coming. Let me backtrack a bit here. After I left that day, I moved into the spare room at my friend Leo's place. Leo's a web developer, super chill guy, and we've been close since high school. He didn't ask a lot of questions when I showed up with a duffel bag and a box of art supplies. Just handed me a key and said, "You want the good side of the fridge or the better side?" In the weeks that followed, I focused on my work more than ever. I picked up more commissions, redesigned my portfolio, even opened a small online shop to sell prints. Every day I wasn't at my parents' house felt like a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding finally let go. And yet, their calls kept coming. Not every day, but enough. A second voicemail from Mom, a few days after the first. "Evan, please. We need to explain. We didn't mean to hurt you. Things are just different now. Callie's going through a hard time, and we've realized some things. Please call us back." realize some things. That line stuck with me. Realization implies regret. But regret, when it's convenient, doesn't feel sincere. You know the saying, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time? Well, Teresa and Mark had been showing me who they were since I was old enough to tell the difference between attention and approval. And the older I got, the more I understood that in our house, love came with conditions. If you made them look good, if you followed the plan, if you succeeded by their definition, then you were in the inner circle. If you didn't, well, you got envelopes with lectures in place of gifts. You got silence when you most needed support. You got left behind. So now they wanted me to come back. Now they wanted to talk. But here's the thing. I wasn't the same person who'd walked out of that kitchen. And I wasn't about to come crawling back just because something in their world fell apart. I needed to know what happened. I needed to understand why, after years of dismissing everything I was, they suddenly had room at the table again. And so, after another day of ignoring their calls, I sent a single message. What happened? No, hi. No, I miss you. Just those 2 words. The reply came from my mom, less than a minute later. Callie lost the job, the one she was supposed to start next month. They rescinded the offer. Something about her online conduct. We're trying to understand it all. She's devastated. Then, another message. We didn't know how much we took you for granted. We see it now. Please come home so we can talk. That word again. Home. A place that only ever felt like mine when I was invisible. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because something wasn't adding up. And I had a feeling Callie's job offer wasn't the only thing that had come crashing down. After that message from my mom, I spent the next few days doing something I hadn't done in a long time. I listened. But not to them. To everyone else. I reached out to some of Callie's old classmates, a few neighbors, even the college counselor who had helped her with her applications. Nobody was eager to talk at first, but when I mentioned that I was trying to understand what really happened, a few things started coming out. First, the job offer had been pulled because of an incident involving Callie's social media. Apparently, there had been some pretty harsh posts, complaints about her coworkers, snide remarks about the company's management, things that would be considered unprofessional, to put it mildly. The company had found out and decided to cut ties before she even started. But that wasn't the full story. The real surprise was what one of Callie's classmates told me. Your parents pushed her hard, like really hard. They controlled everything. Not just the classes, but her whole life. And when she slipped up, it wasn't just a mistake. They made sure everyone knew. I felt my stomach knot. Years of quiet tension, of feeling less than, of being the disappointment at every family event. It all clicked into place. Teresa and Mark weren't just disappointed in me. They were calculating. They had built this entire house of cards where Callie was the golden child and I was the shadow. But when Callie's foundation cracked, they scrambled. And that's when I realized, if I wanted to get back what was taken from me, I wasn't going to ask nicely. I had to expose them. But how? I thought back to that note they gave me, the one telling me to face reality. It was so cold, so cruel, and yet, it was also a confession. They lost faith. Not in Callie. Not in me. In me. Because I wasn't useful. I decided to start collecting proof. Proof of their favoritism. Proof of how they had treated me unfairly. Old emails, text messages, even voicemails where my mom admitted she was worried I'd never amount to anything. I even dug up some conversations between Callie and my parents, where she admitted she was scared of disappointing them and felt like a prisoner in her own life. With each piece I found, my plan took shape. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I started writing a detailed letter, not just for them, but for anyone who had ever been caught in their web. I wanted it to be clear, undeniable. I reached out to a local journalist who specialized in family dynamics and abuse of control. After sending some excerpts of what I had, they agreed to meet. This was just the beginning. I knew the moment I sent that letter, my parents would realize I wasn't the kid who'd walk away quietly anymore. And I was ready for that fight. Because sometimes, revenge isn't about breaking people down. It's about showing them who you really are, and that the person they tried to erase still stands. After arranging the meeting with the journalist, I spent a few more days gathering everything. Old messages, photos, screenshots of conversations, even some voice recordings I had saved from phone calls where my mom's tone was less the polite and concerned mother and more cold and dismissive. When the day came, I handed over a thick folder with everything inside. The journalist promised to keep my identity confidential, but was clear this story had real weight. proof of emotional manipulation, favoritism, and how my parents weaponized expectations to control both me and Callie. The article ran about 2 weeks later. It didn't name anyone explicitly, but it was detailed enough that a few close family friends reached out with shock and sympathy. Suddenly, my parents found themselves the subject of whispered conversations. Invitations to community events dried up. Even some distant relatives started avoiding family gatherings. Callie, meanwhile, was forced to confront what she'd been shielding for years. She reached out to me after the article was published. "I'm sorry, Evan," she said, voice breaking over the phone. "I never wanted this to happen like this. But I'm tired of pretending everything was perfect." That was the first real apology I'd heard from her. Genuine, unfiltered, and weighted with years of frustration. My parents tried to respond with damage control, emails full of empty apologies, promises to change, pleas for forgiveness, but it was too late. Their carefully curated image had shattered. I didn't return home immediately. I stayed with Leo for a while longer, focusing on my art and rebuilding my life on my own terms. Eventually, I did meet with my parents face to face. It was tense. I laid everything out. How their favoritism hurt me, how their words made me doubt myself for years, and how they lost me because they never saw me as enough. They listened, or at least they pretended to. I left that conversation feeling lighter, but also resolute. I wasn't going to be defined by their opinions anymore. Now, months have passed since the article came out and everything started to unravel. Callie and I have been cautiously rebuilding some kind of relationship, not the warm, perfect sibling bond that I always wished for, but something real and fragile. It's slow, deliberate work, like carefully piecing together a broken vase that doesn't quite fit back the same way it did before. At first, we barely spoke. After all the years of competition, resentment, and silence, there was a lot to unpack. Our conversation started with small things, a text asking how a freelance project was going, or me sending her a picture of a dog that looked like the one she used to have as a kid. Those little exchanges felt like tentative bridges across a chasm we both feared to cross. We both realized we had spent so much of our lives trying to live up to or live down the expectations set by Teresa and Mark that we'd lost sight of who we really were or wanted to be outside of that family drama. There were nights when she called, voice shaky, apologizing for not standing up to our parents sooner, for playing the golden child role when it was just as suffocating for her as the disappointment role had been for me. I listened, and sometimes I admitted to her that I wasn't perfect either, that I'd held on to anger longer than was healthy, and that I was just trying to figure out what forgiveness meant in this new context. We agreed that our relationship couldn't heal overnight, and honestly, maybe it never would fully. But it could grow into something different, something not dictated by Teresa and Mark's need to pit us against each other. Meanwhile, Teresa and Mark have been left to deal with the fallout in a way they never anticipated. The tight-knit circle of family friends and neighbors who once looked up to them, the people who celebrated their perfect children and their successful family, have quietly stepped away. Invitations stopped coming. Phone calls went unanswered. The applause that used to greet every achievement now turned to murmurs of disappointment. Their attempts to regain control have been transparent at best and desperate at worst. They've sent out carefully worded emails to relatives, posted vague apologies on social media, and even tried to host a few small gatherings in the hopes of rebuilding their image. But every move they make just reminds people of the distance between their public persona and the reality we exposed. What hurts Teresa and Mark the most, I believe, isn't simply the loss of admiration from the community or the fading of their carefully constructed reputation. It runs far deeper than that. It's the crushing realization that no one truly trusts them anymore, not family, not friends, not even the acquaintances who used to nod politely in their presence. Their words have lost their power. Every apology sounds rehearsed. Every promise to do better feels like an echo of empty rhetoric. This isn't surprising, really, because for decades they built their identity on a foundation of appearances rather than honesty, control rather than compassion. The facade they maintained was so polished that no one dared question what lay beneath until it all started to crumble. Their public persona was a perfect picture: proud parents, successful children, a household that seemed to have it all together. But behind closed doors, the reality was far less flattering. Teresa's calculated praise for Callie, Mark's cold dismissal of my ambitions, the way they whispered judgments when they thought no one could hear, it all revealed a family fractured by fear and expectation. When the article came out, It was like someone had torn off the velvet curtain, exposing the machinery behind the grand show. People saw the cracks and, just as important, the deliberate ways Teresa and Mark hid them. Suddenly, the people who once applauded them began to question every word, every gesture, every interaction. And so, trust evaporated. It wasn't just about being disappointed or feeling betrayed. It was about recognizing that the entire foundation had been a lie. And for people who value authenticity, there's nothing more damaging. This loss of trust left Teresa and Mark in a place they hadn't prepared for: isolation. Invitations they once received with ease stopped coming. Neighbors they casually greeted began crossing the street to avoid them. Even distant relatives started returning holiday cards with generic notes, carefully avoiding any mention of the family drama. In their attempts to repair the damage, Teresa and Mark made missteps that only underscored how little they understood the situation. They sent out vague apologies that never acknowledged the true extent of their mistakes. They hosted small get-togethers, hoping to reset the narrative, but these gatherings felt forced, hollow, and were quickly forgotten. Their need to control the narrative clashed with the community's growing awareness. People didn't want polished words. They wanted accountability, transparency, and change. And those were things Teresa and Mark couldn't offer without confronting the parts of themselves they had long refused to face. As for me, I won't pretend that I'm completely healed. Emotional wounds, especially those inflicted over years of neglect and conditional love, don't simply fade away with time. The scars remain beneath the surface, sometimes dormant, sometimes flaring up when I least expect it. There are still moments, quiet, unguarded moments, when the old doubts sneak back in. I catch myself wondering if I'm truly enough, if I will ever be enough for the people who matter most in my life. It's a question that echoes from years of being made to feel like a failure, like I wasn't worthy of support or belief unless I fit a certain mold. But those moments are becoming fewer and farther between. With every step forward, with every success I claim on my own terms, the grip of those doubts loosens. I'm learning to recognize those feelings as remnants of a past that no longer defines me. The most significant change, though, is that I've reclaimed my voice. For so long, Teresa and Mark tried to silence me with their judgment and dismissal. They wanted me to shrink, to disappear into the background so Callie's star could shine brighter. They framed their approval as the only path to validation, and their disapproval as a punishment worse than any words could express. But I found that voice again. It's not just about speaking up anymore. It's about being heard. It's about standing in spaces where my art is celebrated, where my ideas are welcomed, and where I am recognized for who I am, not just for what I failed to be in their eyes. This reclamation of self has been both empowering and humbling. I've discovered communities, online and in person, that value authenticity and creativity. I've formed friendships with people who see my worth beyond grades, titles, or family drama. My dignity, once fragile and precarious, has become a fortress I protect fiercely. It is the foundation of the life I am building now, and I refuse to let anyone tear it down again. Setting boundaries, asserting my needs, and choosing where and how to invest my energy have become acts of self-respect. I am no longer willing to tolerate anything less. In the end, I've come to understand that the best kind of revenge isn't about tearing someone down or loudly proving them wrong. It's quieter, more profound, and far more lasting. It's about standing tall even when the world expects you to fall. It's about refusing to be invisible anymore, even when the ones who should love you the most tried to make you disappear. It's about living fully, unapologetically, on my own terms, creating a life defined not by their expectations or disappointments, but by my own values and dreams. And that, I've realized, is the most powerful victory of all. It is not revenge born of bitterness or anger. It is the triumph of resilience and self-love. It is freedom. And finally, it is peace. My name's Eric, I'm 36, and I have 2 kids, Sam, 9, and Lily, 6. Their mom and I divorced 4 years ago. It wasn't messy or dramatic, just 2 people who realized we weren't making each other better anymore. We split custody pretty evenly, and when I have the kids, I'm all in. Pancake breakfasts, Sunday hikes, Lego towers that collapse halfway up. My apartment is loud, a little chaotic, and sometimes smells faintly of glitter glue, but it's home. My family, though, they've always been a little more polished. My sister Claire especially. She's 38, child-free by choice, and married to this guy named Greg who wears turtlenecks even when it's hot out and ends sentences with full stop. She lives 20 minutes from my parents' place, where Christmas dinner is held every year without fail, cloth napkins, matching plates, A carved roast that's always slightly undercooked because mom insists that medium rare is elegant. I've been bringing Sam and Lily to Christmas dinner since they were toddlers. Some years, they've fallen asleep under the tree. Some years, they've knocked over a few ornaments. Once, Sam licked a candy cane and stuck it to the window. They're kids. They laugh too loud sometimes. They bicker over who gets the last roll, but they're good kids. Sweet, funny, bright-eyed. They always bring handmade cards for Grandma and Grandpa. Lily spends weeks coloring hers in glitter pens, and Sam always signs his with an extra big S because he says it looks like a superhero logo. Last year, my dad told me to bring them over an hour later than everyone else so they don't get bored waiting for food. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe mom was running behind or the guest list was a bit tighter. The timing fell off, but I wasn't in the mood to pick a fight, and the kids didn't seem to notice. But looking back, I should have seen it. That was the first warning sign. Claire never outright said anything about my kids. She's a master of passive-aggressive silence. If Lily dropped a spoon, she'd wince like it shattered. If Sam laughed too loud, she'd sigh and glance over her wine glass like she was enduring a war zone. At Thanksgiving 2 years ago, Greg asked if I'd considered behavioral therapy just to nip things in the bud early. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Still, I never thought it would escalate. We're not a huge family. Just me, Claire, my parents, and an elderly aunt who's now in assisted living. There are no cousins or distant uncles coming in from out of state. So when I got the group text about Christmas Eve dinner this year, I figured it would be like every other year. I had Sam and Lily with me for the holiday week, and they were already excited. Lily had drawn a snowman family labeled me, Sam, Daddy, Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt Claire, and Mean Greg. I swear I didn't coach her on that. And Sam had practiced a piano version of Jingle Bells to perform for everyone. We even picked out matching sweaters. Mine said Papa Elf. Theirs said Little Elf, with reindeer antlers stitched on. Lily insisted we wear them to dinner. But then, on the morning of Christmas Eve, I got a text from Claire. It read, "Hey, Mom says your kids make too much noise. Maybe skip dinner this year. It's just too much." At first, I thought it was a joke. I stared at the screen, waiting for a follow-up. A winky face. Just kidding. Something. But nothing came. Just that one cold, sterile sentence. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. I felt like I'd been kicked in the chest. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was Dad. I answered, hoping, praying, that he'd tell me Claire was just being dramatic. That of course we were still welcome. That he wanted to see his grandkids open presents and eat too many cookies. Instead, he sighed. "Eric," he said, it's been a long year. We thought maybe things could be a little quieter this Christmas. Keep things peaceful. Peaceful." I repeated, stunned. "They're children, Dad. They're not starting bar fights. They're just excited. It's Christmas." "I know, son," he said. "But Claire's hosting this year. And you know how she gets. It's just easier this way." He actually said that. It's just easier this way. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sam and Lily were in the living room, building a pillow fort, laughing, completely unaware that their own grandparents were talking about them like they were a problem to be avoided. I hung up without saying goodbye. For about an hour, I paced my apartment. I didn't cry. I was too angry for that. But I definitely sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the carpet, wondering how we got here. When did my kids become too much? When did my own family start viewing them as background noise to be muted? Lily walked in with a string of plastic beads she'd made into a bracelet. "This is for Grandma," she said, holding it out proudly. That's when I made my decision. I told the kids we were doing something different this year. Something way cooler than dinner at Aunt Claire's. We bundled up, wore our matching sweaters, and went to their favorite pizza place. The one with the arcade in the back and the little claw machine that's rigged but still fun. We had cheesy breadsticks, root beer floats, and played skee-ball until our fingers hurt. I didn't check my phone once. By the time we got home, it was nearly 11 p.m. I tucked the kids into bed, kissed them on the forehead, and finally checked my phone. Missed calls, texts, voicemails, all from Mom, Dad, and Claire. I didn't respond. I blocked all three of them. But then, at midnight, my voicemail dinged again. Just one more. I don't know why, but I listened. It was my mom. Her voice was quiet, like she didn't know the recording had started. At the 042 mark, I heard it. A whisper. Not to me, But near the phone, maybe to my dad. Maybe now he'll finally learn his place. I froze. Learn my place? I played it back 3 times to make sure I heard it right. My place. That was the moment my chest tightened. The moment everything fell into focus. They hadn't just excluded my kids because they were loud. They didn't want them there because we weren't convenient anymore. Because I wasn't convenient. A single dad with 2 noisy, glitter-covered reminders that life doesn't always follow the Claire and Greg blueprint. They wanted peace. I was about to give them something else entirely. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the whisper playing over and over in my head like a broken record. Maybe now he'll finally learn his place. My place. What was that supposed to mean? That I was supposed to stay on the sidelines? Show up only when invited? Act grateful for crumbs? Be the convenient son, the quiet one, the one who didn't ruffle Claire's perfect little dinner parties with my noisy, imperfect kids? The next morning, Christmas Day, I did what any dad with half a backbone would do. I hugged Sam and Lily a little tighter. I helped them open presents while pretending not to hear the vibrations from my blocked collars buzzing against the nightstand. They didn't notice anything was wrong, which I took as both a blessing and a warning. They trusted me to shield them from this. Around noon, I opened my laptop and did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled up the photo archives. Old pictures from when Claire and I were kids. Birthdays, holidays, beach trips. I was looking for something, proof, maybe, that this hadn't always been so one-sided. That once upon a time, I wasn't the second-class son. That there was a version of my family where I wasn't background noise to Claire's spotlight. But the deeper I went, the more obvious the pattern became. There was Claire, age 6, with a Barbie dream house the size of a coffee table. My 6th birthday, a plastic fire truck and a cake that said, "Happy birthday, buddy," because they forgot to order the custom one I picked out. Claire's high school graduation, full album, catered party, framed diploma, speeches. Mine, a single blurry picture of me standing in a wrinkled gown next to Dad, who looks like he's checking his watch. I closed the laptop. It wasn't new. It had just become impossible to ignore. I decided I wasn't going to confront them yet. Not right away. I wanted to wait, observe, listen. And the perfect opportunity came 2 weeks later, Mom's birthday. Every year, without fail, we did dinner at her place. Claire always planned it. Greg always brought wine. I always brought Sam and Lily, who always brought handmade gifts. This year, I waited to see if they'd even invite me. They did. Or rather, Claire did. Her message came through email. Not a text. An email. "Hi, Eric. We're planning a small birthday dinner for Mom on the 14th. Just adults this time. It's what Mom requested. Hope you understand." No mention of Sam or Lily. No apology for Christmas. No acknowledgement that anything had happened. Just hope you understand. I didn't respond right away. I called my mom instead, and to my surprise, she actually picked up. "Hey, Mom," I said, voice steady. "Got Claire's email. Just wanted to double check. Did you really ask for an adult-only dinner?" There was a pause. A little too long. "I did," she finally said, but it was quiet. Hesitant. "You sure? Because Sam and Lily already made you cards. And Lily wrote you a song on that little ukulele I got her." Another pause. This time longer. "I just thought it might be easier. Less stressful," she said. "Claire's been doing so much lately. She's really stepped up." There it was again. Easier. Everything was about what made life easier for Claire. Not what made life meaningful. Not who showed up. Just what made Claire shine brightest. I wanted to shout, "Mom, she lives 20 minutes away and doesn't have kids. What exactly is she stepping up from?" But I didn't. I thanked her. Hung up. And this time, I didn't block them. I wanted to see what happened next. The night of the dinner, I did something petty. I won't lie. I showed up. Not with the kids. Just me. I parked across the street, waited until I saw Greg's car pull in, and then walked right up the path and rang the doorbell. Claire answered. Her face dropped. "Eric," she said flatly. "Happy birthday to Mom," I said, holding up a little gift bag. Thought I'd swing by. Just me. No noise. She stood in the doorway for a second like she couldn't decide whether to let me in or not. Eventually, she stepped aside. Inside, everything was as polished as ever. Table set with silver cutlery, candles lit, jazz music playing low. Greg was uncorking a bottle in the kitchen. My dad looked up from the living room with a strained smile. Mom was in the dining room, arranging place cards. Place cards. Like this was a wedding reception. I handed her the gift, just a simple necklace Lily picked out online. Cheap, but thoughtful. Mom took it without really looking at it. That's sweet, Eric, she said. But you didn't have to. I know, I said. But I wanted to. She gave me a tight smile and turned back to her place cards. That was when I saw it. My name wasn't on any of them. Greg, Claire, Mom, Dad. No fifth seat. I wasn't expected. Claire called from the kitchen. Eric, we weren't sure you'd be coming. Why's that? I asked, knowing full well why. She shrugged, walking into the room with 2 glasses of wine. She handed one to Mom. After Christmas, we figured maybe you needed space. You mean after you disinvited my kids? She blinked. I didn't disinvite them. I passed along Mom's message. Mom looked down at her wine glass. I nodded slowly. Got it. And the message was what? That Sam's laugh ruins your turkey? That Lily's glitter pens offend your placemats? Greg appeared behind her, looking uncomfortable. Let's not make this into a scene, he said. I turned to him. Greg, I've seen wallpaper with more personality than you. I'm not worried about making a scene. Eric, Dad said sharply. Enough. That was it. The word. Enough. Like I was a child. Like I was causing something. I laughed. You're right. It is enough. I'm done. And I walked out. Not dramatically. Not with the door slam. I just walked out. That night, I sat with Sam and Lily on the living room floor, and we had our own little celebration. We made pancakes. Watched a movie. I let them stay up too late. Lily sang the ukulele song for me instead. She called it Birthday Stars. It made me cry. That should have been the end. That should have been the turning point. But it got worse. In late February, I found out, through a mutual friend of Claire's, that she was planning Mom and Dad's 40th wedding anniversary. A big event. Rented space. Invitations. I hadn't heard a thing. So I checked the website Claire had built for the event. Of course she had a website. And there it was. Guest list, RSVP form, and no mention of me or my kids. Not even in the photo slideshow. It was like we didn't exist. The most recent family picture? From 5 years ago. Before my divorce. Before my life got messy. I stared at that page for 20 minutes, my jaw clenched, before finally picking up the phone and calling my mom one last time. She didn't answer. I texted her. Am I really not invited to your anniversary party? 3 dots appeared. Then they vanished. And nothing came back. A day later, I got an email. From Claire. Subject line, let's keep this civil. The body of the email was 2 paragraphs. Short. Cold. Sanitized. Eric, I understand you're upset. But this event is about celebrating Mom and Dad, not creating more tension. Given the tone of your recent messages and the disruption you've caused at family gatherings, we felt it would be best to keep the event intimate. You're welcome to send a card or video message, and I'm sure they'd appreciate that. Hope you understand. Hope you understand. That was the moment I stopped waiting for understanding. That was the moment I stopped being heard and started planning. Because they didn't just push me out of a dinner or a birthday. They erased me. They erased my children. And they thought I'd just sit there and take it. But they forgot something. They forgot who helped Dad through his hip surgery. Who brought Mom groceries during lockdown. Who gave Claire a loan when Greg's business almost collapsed. They forgot who had been quietly keeping score. They forgot I had receipts. Literally. And now? It was time to collect. I didn't get out of bed for 2 days. That might sound pathetic, but that email, let's keep this civil. It hit like a final punch to the ribs after you're already on the floor. The kind where you don't even flinch anymore because you're too numb. For the first time in a long time, I genuinely didn't know what to do. Not as a father. Not as a son. Not as a brother. Just as a person. I kept rereading Claire's words. Disruption you've caused at family gatherings. The only thing I'd ever caused was showing up with my kids. And the only disruption I brought was love that wasn't polished or quiet or pre-approved. It was late February. Still cold, gray, unforgiving. I told Sam and Lily I wasn't feeling well, and thankfully they were with their mom that weekend, so I didn't have to keep up the brave face for too long. I turned off my phone, pulled the blanket over my head, and for about 48 hours, I sat in that silence, soaking in a truth I hadn't wanted to face. I was grieving people who were still alive. It felt worse than my divorce. At least with that, there were reasons, conversations, an ending. But this was a slow erasure. 1,000 tiny cuts over years until one day you realize you're bleeding out in an empty room and nobody noticed. On the 3rd morning, I got up and looked in the mirror. I looked tired, like someone twice my age. There was stubble that hadn't turned into a beard yet, just enough to make me look like I gave up. I was wearing the same hoodie from 2 days ago, but for the first time in a while, I didn't flinch when I looked at myself. I didn't look broken. I looked angry. And beneath the anger, I looked focused. I showered, cleaned the apartment, brewed a strong cup of coffee. Then I sat down and opened a blank Google Doc, and I made a list. It was titled, What They Forgot. $7,000 loan to Claire and Greg in 2019, never repaid. No contract, but I have the Venmo receipts. 2 months of groceries for mom during the pandemic. At least $1,200. Also have receipts. Hours spent caring for dad post-surgery. I used 2 weeks of PTO. Claire visited twice. Claire's wedding. I paid for half the DJ. No one ever mentioned it again. Every family holiday I hosted at my apartment because theirs wasn't ready. Gifts, gas money, babysitting favors, emergency pickups. All the times I said, it's fine, when it really wasn't. The list was 4 pages long by the time I was done. Not because I wanted revenge right away, but because I needed proof, for myself, that I hadn't imagined the imbalance, that I hadn't been dramatic, that I'd been holding this family up for years while they smiled for holiday photos and quietly cut me out of frame. Once the list was finished, I sat back and took a breath. And that's when something clicked. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table anymore. I was going to build my own. For years, I'd worked a steady IT job at a mid-sized logistics firm. Nothing flashy, just enough to support the kids, pay the bills, and occasionally treat myself to concert tickets or take out sushi when the mood struck. But I'd always had a side hustle. Tech consulting, small business digital setups, website builds. Most of it came through word of mouth and Craigslist, and I'd always told myself I'd never rely on it full-time because it wasn't stable. But stability hadn't exactly done me any favors. So I pulled out my notebook, the same one where Sam had doodled a spaceship and Lily wrote, "I love you, Dad," in shaky bubble letters, and I wrote across the top, "This is your new beginning." For the next 3 months, I worked harder than I ever had in my life. I redid my portfolio, reached out to old clients, built a small website from scratch with testimonials, packages, and a blog. I even offered free digital audits to local businesses and got 3 paid gigs from that alone. I took on 2 projects a week, sometimes more, often staying up past midnight after the kids fell asleep. But it didn't feel like burnout. It felt like momentum. Every invoice I sent, every client I onboard, every "thank you so much, Eric, we couldn't have done it without you," was a brick in the foundation of a life I was building, without the approval of people who never really saw me in the first place. And the best part? Sam and Lily noticed. "Why are you always typing, Daddy?" Lily asked one night, curling up next to me on the couch. "I'm building something," I said. "A fort?" she asked. "Kind of," I smiled. "A future." She thought about that for a second, then nodded like she got it. "I want a sparkly one." "Done," I said. By mid-May, I'd matched my old monthly income. By June, I'd surpassed it. I put in my 2-week notice at the IT job, and for the first time in my adult life, I was my own boss. With the extra income, I didn't buy a new car or take a vacation. I got Sam a secondhand electric keyboard and enrolled Lily in art classes. I repainted their room, upgraded their beds, started meal prepping with them on Sundays. Little things that made our home ours. Every night before bed, I'd update the list in my notebook. But now it wasn't about what they forgot. It was about what I was remembering. That I was enough. That my kids were more than enough. That the family I'd built, noisy and imperfect and full of glitter, was something to be proud of. Still, I won't lie, there was a part of me that wanted them to see it, to feel it. And then, fate handed me the perfect opportunity. In July, I got a letter in the mail. A formal invitation. Embossed, perfumed, and signed. Claire and Greg were renewing their vows. A whole ceremony. Outdoor venue. Elegant attire requested. Champagne reception. And, of course, adults only. But this time, I was invited. Eric plus guest. No mention of Sam and Lily. The second I saw it, my hands clenched. Not because I wanted to go, I didn't. But because the audacity was staggering. They'd frozen me out of Christmas, erased me from their anniversary slideshow, ignored every olive branch I'd ever offered, and now they wanted me there, as part of the audience, to clap politely while Claire twirled in another white dress? No, but I wasn't going to say no. I was going to say yes and bring the storm with me. I RSVP'd immediately. No +1. Just me. And then I started planning. I'm not talking about crashing the wedding or throwing a drink on anyone. That's not my style. I'm a builder, a strategist. And this wasn't about chaos. This was about clarity. The weeks leading up to the vow renewal, I worked quietly behind the scenes. Not in anger, in calculation. I updated my professional portfolio with screenshots of the website I'd built for Claire's wedding years ago, back when she'd forgotten to give me credit. I gathered receipts, literally and digitally, from every dollar I'd poured into family events, groceries, and favors over the years. I printed it all out, neatly, in color-coded folders, and I began crafting something else. Not for Claire, not for Greg, not even for my parents. For me, it was a letter, or a speech, or maybe just a long, uninterrupted truth. Something that captured what the last few years had really been. The slow exile, the quiet cruelty, the 1,000 tiny rejections disguised as boundaries. Something that said, I see you. I see what you did. And I'm still here. I wasn't sure if I'd read it out loud, or send it in the mail, or leave it in an envelope under someone's plate at the reception. But I knew it needed to be written, because this wasn't just about proving a point. It was about reclaiming the part of me that they thought they could erase, the messy, loud, deeply loving dad who showed up even when he wasn't invited. The brother who gave without keeping score, until now. The son who finally realized that sometimes, family is just another word for a battlefield. The vow renewal was coming, and I'd be there, not as a guest, not as a ghost, but as the version of me they never saw coming. I arrived at the venue exactly 23 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to start. It was one of those rented countryside estates with overpriced roses in clay pots lining the cobblestone walkway, and signs painted in faux cursive that said things like love, laughter, and a lifetime after. The kind of place that makes people pretend they're royalty for a day. Claire's kind of place. I wore a tailored navy blue suit. Not expensive, but clean, fitted, sharp. The kind of suit you wear when you want to look like you belong in any room, even the ones that once tried to shut you out. And I brought something with me. Not a date, not a gift, a briefcase, leather, black, unassuming. But inside it, every piece of the life I'd built while they were busy erasing me. Documents, invoices, emails, screenshots, Venmo records, printouts of text messages, photos of Sam and Lily's handmade gifts, the ones that never even made it to the fridge. Records of every family favor, every sacrifice, every overlooked contribution. But more importantly, a truth bomb they weren't expecting. The setup had taken weeks. It started small, a call to my accountant. Just a casual conversation about small business incorporation, deductible expenses, and whether unpaid loans between family members could technically be categorized as business write-offs if they were tied to a service or informal agreement. The answer was, in some cases, yes. Then came the legal consult. 1 hour, $275. Worth every penny. I explained the $7,000 I'd loaned Claire and Greg in 2019, originally meant to help bridge the gap after Greg's consulting firm tanked. There was no contract, no interest, just a promise over coffee that they'd pay me back within 6 months. It had been 4 years. Legally, my chances of recouping that money were slim. Morally, I had every right to make noise about it. The lawyer smiled at me across the table. You're not here to sue, he said. You're here to send a message. Exactly. So I got to work. Step 1. I rebuilt the original invoice I'd made for their wedding website. The one I'd designed from scratch in 2017. Claire never paid me, said it was a gift. And I had let it slide, because that's what family does, right? Except now it was back, in full color, with itemized charges. Step 2. I compiled a report. Yes, an actual report, titled Uncompensated Family Labor, 2015 to 2023. It detailed every holiday I'd hosted when Claire couldn't clean her place. Every time I'd babysat Greg's niece when they were stuck. Every time I'd picked up mom's prescriptions, shoveled their driveway, or driven dad to physical therapy. It wasn't petty. It was precise. And it served a purpose. Because Step 3 was the card. You know, the kind you leave in the gift basket at a wedding or a vow renewal. The one that says congratulations, with some glittery cursive and maybe a $50 bill tucked inside. Mine said this: Dear Claire and Greg, Wishing you a beautiful day and an even more honest tomorrow. May your vows be stronger than your memory. Eric. I placed it in a pale cream envelope, wrote, "For the happy couple" in gold pen, and sealed it with a wax stamp I ordered off Etsy. A tiny stamp shaped like a wolf. Symbolic? Maybe. Dramatic? Definitely. But this wasn't just about style. It was about timing. Because timing was everything. When I arrived at the estate, the parking lot was already full of black SUVs and luxury sedans. Clearly, Claire and Greg spared no expense. Champagne flutes were clinking in the distance, and a string quartet was tuning up under a white canopy. Guests in pastel suits and flower print dresses milled around the courtyard, laughing politely. I slipped in unnoticed, nodding at the usher like I'd been expected. My name was on the guest list. Not because they wanted me there, but because they needed me to look like the difficult brother who never showed up when it came time for the speech. But I had no intention of missing this. I made my way to the welcome table, where gift envelopes were being dropped into a white decorative box. The box had "Claire and Greg Forever" etched on the front in metallic script. I slid mine in. Then I did one more thing. I handed a sealed manila envelope, labeled to be opened after the ceremony, to the young woman managing the welcome desk. "Hi," I said, polite but firm. "I've been asked to give this to the officiant. It's the couple's final guest announcement. They wanted it read aloud after the vows." She hesitated. "Is this approved?" "Absolutely." Greg signed off himself. She looked unsure, but I smiled, nodded, and walked away before she could protest. I didn't lie. Greg had signed off. He just didn't know it. A few weeks earlier, I'd sent him a short email, pretending to be a family friend helping with last-minute coordination. I asked if he'd be okay with a brief message from the extended family being read after the ceremony, as a surprise tribute. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a "sure, as long as it doesn't run too long, LOL. I screenshotted the reply and included it in the envelope. Inside, a printout of the guest list, annotated with the names of every person Claire and Greg had accepted help from over the years, many of whom they never acknowledged. At the bottom, it read, "Some vows are made in private, others in public. And then there are the ones we make silently. To the people who held us up when we weren't looking. May we always remember those vows too." It wasn't explosive. It wasn't cruel. But it would land. Because the people in that crowd, they didn't know the truth. They thought Claire was the golden daughter, the glue of the family, the hero who took care of her aging parents while her brother just disappeared. That narrative was about to shatter. But I wasn't done yet. Inside the reception tent, I took my assigned seat. Yes, they gave me one, at the very back corner table, near the speaker stand, oddly enough. As I sat down, I saw a familiar face 2 tables over. Derek, my cousin on my dad's side. We weren't close growing up, but we always got along. He gave me a nod, then stood and walked over. "Hey man," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Didn't think I'd see you here." "Yeah, well," I said, sipping water. "Figured I'd show up this time." He lowered his voice. "Your mom?" She looked surprised. "Claire too." "Good," I said. "Let them be." Derek leaned in. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Are you planning something?" I smiled, not answering. He nodded slowly. "Okay, just whatever it is, make it count." And that was the thing. It wasn't about embarrassing them. It wasn't about shouting or ruining their big day. That would have given them sympathy. Turned me into the angry, jealous brother again. No, this was about shifting the narrative. Quietly. Precisely. Permanently. The ceremony began. Claire walked down the aisle in a designer gown. Greg waiting with that stiff smile he always wore when cameras were near. They exchanged flowery vows, made jokes about weathering storms and growing together. Mom dabbed her eyes. Dad nodded proudly. I stayed silent. After the ceremony, as the officiant closed his leather-bound notebook, he pulled a card from his inside pocket. "Oh, one final note," he said into the microphone. The couple requested a brief reading on behalf of their extended family and longtime supporters. They felt it reflected the spirit of gratitude they carry into this next chapter. Claire's eyes flicked toward him, confused. Greg looked equally puzzled. But no one stopped it, because it didn't sound like a threat. And then he read it, word for word. "Some vows are made in private, others in public." You could feel the shift. People straightened. Heads turned. Claire's smile froze. By the time he reached the end, you could hear a pin drop. Then polite applause. Nothing dramatic. But the air had changed, and I hadn't even opened my mouth. That was the first blow. The second? Well, that was already in motion. Because 2 days before the ceremony, I'd sent an anonymous tip to a lifestyle blog Greg had done an interview with last year. One where he praised building from nothing and never accepting help. The tip included photos of my loan receipts, screenshots of texts, copies of emails where Claire asked me to just cover it this once. I didn't frame it as revenge. I framed it as a correction. A little update to the hero narrative they'd built around themselves. I wasn't sure if the blog would run it. But that wasn't the point. The point was, they knew someone new. The armor was cracking, and I was just getting started. They say revenge is best served cold. But this wasn't cold. This was calculated, calm, surgical, and it didn't explode, it unraveled. The morning after the vow renewal, I sat in my kitchen sipping coffee while Sam and Lily built a Lego roller coaster behind me. The notification came in like a whisper, a ping on my old Twitter account I barely used. Someone had tagged me. Wow, this didn't age well. Attached was a screenshot from Greg's year-old blog interview, the one where he preached about bootstrapping success. Below it was a link. I clicked. It was a post on a mid-tier lifestyle and entrepreneurship blog, nothing huge, but with a loyal following. The kind that loves to call out hypocrisy and inflated success stories. The headline hit like a drumbeat. Hollow vows. The truth behind Claire and Greg's built from nothing brand. I read the whole thing in one long, unblinking stare. It was perfect. No names thrown under the bus. No direct accusations. Just a side-by-side of Greg's quotes about refusing handouts, next to screenshots of Venmo transactions, emails asking for support, and thank you notes that had never been made public. It asked one question at the end. Is it really a hand-built empire if it stands on borrowed bricks? The post started gaining traction. People love a good story, especially when the shine wears off the supposedly untouchable. By noon, Greg had made his account private. By 2 p.m., the blog comments were flooded with stories from other people, vendors who'd never been paid, a former intern at Greg's firm who said he was paid in gift cards, even a cousin on Claire's side who chimed in. Eric's always been the real one in the family. I didn't say a word. Not online. Not to anyone. Because my part was done. All I had to do now was watch. 3 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I normally don't answer those. But something told me to this time. Eric, the voice said. It was Dad. I almost didn't recognize him. He sounded older. Smaller. Yeah. A pause. I read some things. Online. About Greg. About Claire. I stayed silent. I didn't know, he said finally. I didn't realize how much you carried. He sounded like he meant it. Like maybe, just maybe, the fog was lifting. You didn't want to know, I said quietly. There's a difference. Another pause. Then, you're right. That was new. I'm sorry, he added. Also new. And I believed him, in that moment at least. Not because he suddenly saw me, but because the illusion had shattered. Claire and Greg had curated a perfect little world for years, one where I was the messy outlier, the one with noisy kids and a chip on his shoulder. But now people were asking questions. And Dad, for the first time, didn't have answers. They're saying the blog post is fake, he continued. Claire says you're bitter, that you're trying to sabotage her. I laughed once. Let them. He hesitated. Is it true? What part? All of it. I thought about lying, about brushing it off. But instead, I said the most honest thing I could. None of it had to happen. I gave them 100 chances to treat me like family. They used every one of them to remind me I wasn't welcome. Dad didn't argue. Can I see the kids sometime? He asked. I didn't answer right away. We'll see, I said eventually. But I'm not pretending anymore. If you want to be part of their life, it's going to be on our terms. Not Claire's. Not yours. He agreed. I don't know if it stuck, but the tone had changed. The next day, I got a text from my mom. Just 3 words. I miss you. No punctuation. No apology. I didn't respond. Let her sit with it. Like I had. Meanwhile, the fallout began to snowball. Greg's consulting firm, which was mostly smoke and mirrors to begin with, lost 2 clients. Both local businesses I'd happened to help with digital work over the years. They reached out to me privately to say thanks for the heads up, without directly confirming they'd seen the blog post. Claire, who'd just started a lifestyle Instagram account full of home decor and quiet luxury tips, began bleeding followers. Not because of anything I said. I hadn't said a word publicly, but because people could smell the phoniness now. Her engagement tanked. She turned off comments, then deleted 3 months of posts. And then came the invitation. Well, not an invitation. More like a peace offering wrapped in panic. It arrived in my inbox a week later. Subject, family brunch? Claire. She wanted to talk. Said it had all been a misunderstanding. Claimed she missed the kids. Said she was willing to move forward. I stared at the message for a full minute. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I clicked reply. Claire, you've always been good at moving forward, usually over people. I'm not interested in brunch. I'm interested in accountability. You don't get to erase us, then invite us back when it's convenient. Sam and Lily aren't noise. They're joy. I hope someday you learn the difference. Until then, enjoy the silence. Eric. I hit send. No mic drop. No dramatic music. Just a line in the sand. Weeks passed. The blog post eventually fell out of rotation, replaced by the next viral outrage. Greg stayed quiet. Claire stopped posting entirely. My parents sent 2 more texts, one of them a photo of me as a toddler with the caption, "Found this. Missed these days." I didn't reply, not because I wanted to punish them, but because I'd finally accepted something. Not everyone gets to come with you, even if they share your last name, even if they knew you when you still had braces and called Fruit Loops dinner. Some people choose to build pedestals instead of tables. And when they knock you off those pedestals enough times, you eventually learn to stop climbing. It's been 4 months. Sam's piano lessons are going great. Lily's art was featured in the school newsletter. We have Sunday night movie marathons, matching pajamas, and a front door sign that says, "Enter loudly." Our little world is messy, unfiltered, alive, and finally, free. I used to think revenge meant taking something away from the people who hurt you. But real revenge? It's showing them what they never got to ruin. And in the end, that's exactly what I did. My family tried to write me out of the story, so I wrote a better one without them. When I was struggling and needed help, my family ignored my calls and went on a luxury cruise. They told me, "If you want us there, you'll have to pay for our expenses." I said, "Enjoy your vacation. I'll remember this when you're the ones left alone." A week later, what happened blew them away. Hi Reddit. I'm 40F, and I never thought I'd post something like this here, but after what happened earlier this year, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. It's been sitting with me like a knot in my stomach, slowly tightening every time I replay it in my head. Some days, I still ask myself if maybe I misunderstood, or overreacted, or read too much into their tone. But deep down, I know I didn't. So here's what happened. To understand the full story, I need to start with some context. My family has always been complicated. Not the loud, dramatic kind you see on TV or in movies, but more the subtle, layered kind. The kind where everything seems fine on the surface, but underneath, there's a quiet hierarchy that no one talks about. A certain way things are done. A certain order in which people's needs are prioritized. And I learned pretty early on that I was never at the top of that list. I'm the second of 5 siblings. There's Aaron, 45M, the oldest, always the one who set the standard. My parents still brag about how he skipped a grade and started his own practice before 30. Then Caleb, 43M, who was always quiet and polite and didn't cause waves. Then me. Then Marissa, 38F, the favorite, though no one in the family would admit it. And finally Brooke, 35F, who followed Marissa around like a shadow growing up. Our parents, Ted and Angela, were strict but distant. Dad worked in finance, and Mom stayed home most of our childhood, though she wasn't exactly nurturing. She kept things running, laundry, dinners, appointments, but affection was not her strong suit. Dad was quieter, always in his office or out playing golf, and rarely involved in anything outside of his work. I was the helper. That was my role. When Marissa needed a ride to her after-school rehearsals, I drove her. When Brooke forgot her homework, I'd take the late bus home so I could bring it to her. I did it because someone had to, and I got used to it. I didn't expect praise. I just thought, that's what family does. You show up when others don't. And I did okay. I went to college, paid my own way, graduated without any major incidents. I started a catering business in my early 30s, small events at first, then weddings, corporate events, fundraisers. It was a lot of work, but I loved it. There's something satisfying about watching an empty venue turn into a full, buzzing event that you helped bring together. By the end of last year, things were finally looking up. I had 3 weddings booked for the winter season, 2 holiday parties, and a growing list of referrals. I wasn't rich by any means, but I was stable and proud of what I'd built. Then in January, everything unraveled. It started with the fire. I'll never forget that phone call. It was 2:14 a.m. I was asleep when the building owner called me. His voice was shaky, and I remember the first thing he said was, "There's no easy way to say this." A faulty wire in the unit next to mine had sparked, and by the time firefighters arrived, half the building was filled with smoke. My kitchen, where I kept all of my equipment, my ingredients, my paperwork, was damaged badly. Water and smoke had ruined most of it. The ovens, the prep tables, the supplies, even the storage shelves I'd custom built over time. Gone, or unusable. Insurance, of course, would help eventually, but those processes are slow. I was looking at months before I could even begin to recover. Meanwhile, I had events on the calendar, payments I owed to clients, refunds to issue, contracts I had to break. And I didn't have enough in savings to cover all of it. I tried to keep it together the first week. Told myself it was temporary, that I'd find a way through it, like I always had. But one night, after spending the day boxing up what little could be salvaged, I sat down in my apartment and realized I needed help. I didn't want to ask. I never had before, not really. But I didn't have many options left. So I started with the person I thought was most likely to at least listen, Aaron. He picked up after a few rings. I explained what had happened, trying to stay calm and rational. I didn't want to sound desperate, even though I probably did. I told him I didn't need much, just something to get through the next few weeks. A short-term loan, maybe. Anything. He paused. I remember hearing the clink of silverware in the background, like he was at dinner. "Wow," he said. That's a lot. I'm sorry, that's really rough." Then another pause. "I wish I could help, but with the kids' school tuition and everything this month, I just don't think it's realistic. Maybe try the bank." I thanked him, even though my throat felt tight. Next was Caleb. Similar story. He listened politely, said he understood, but things were tight right now, and they were trying to save for a remodel. "Have you tried looking for a grant?" he asked. "There's probably a government thing for this sort of situation." By the time I called Brooke, I was already bracing myself. She didn't answer. Just a text 3 hours later. "Hey, just saw your missed call. Hope everything's okay. Thinking of you." 2 exclamation points. That stung more than I expected. I waited 3 more days before calling Marissa. When I finally called Marissa, I was expecting at least some kindness, some kind of support. I'd helped her out so many times before. I thought maybe she'd at least listen. She answered on the second ring. The screen showed her sitting in what looked like a bright, spacious room with whitewashed walls, tropical plants in the background, and a big window letting in sunlight. She looked relaxed, more relaxed than I had felt in weeks. "Hey, what's up?" she said, smiling like nothing was wrong. I told her about the fire. I explained the damage, the refunds I'd already had to send, how my savings were gone. I kept my voice steady, hoping she wouldn't hear the panic underneath. There was a long pause. Then she tilted her head, like she was considering what to say next. "That's really unfortunate," she said finally, sounding almost rehearsed. "I'm trying to figure out what to do next," I said. "I was hoping maybe you or someone in the family could help, just for a little while." Marissa sighed, a little too loudly. "You know, the family is actually going on that cruise next week. It's Mom's 70th birthday trip." I froze for a second. "Wait, what cruise?" She gave a small laugh, like I was missing some obvious detail. "The family cruise. We've been planning it for months. It's kind of a big deal." I blinked. I hadn't heard a word about this. Not a call, not a text, not even a hint. I asked if anyone had mentioned it to me. "No," she said flatly. "Because we figured, realistically, you wouldn't be able to afford it." I sat back, the weight of that sinking in. No one had told me because they didn't think I was worth including. "So, you're all going on a luxury cruise," I said quietly. "And no one thought to tell me." "Look, it's not like you've been involved in the family lately," she said. "Mom and Dad are paying for the adults, but if anyone else wants to come, they have to cover their own expenses. First class, 5-star suites. It's not cheap." I was quiet for a moment, trying to process it. "So basically, if I want to be there, I have to pay for myself?" She shrugged. "Yep, that's what Dad said." I wanted to ask why no one had even reached out to ask how I was doing, but I stopped myself. I could hear her tone, dismissive, almost mocking, like my struggles were some sort of joke. "Enjoy your vacation," I said softly, my voice steady now. I'll remember this when you're the ones left alone." She blinked, maybe confused by how calm I sounded. Then she smiled, bright and unapologetic. "Well, enjoy whatever you're doing. Bye." And she hung up. That was the moment something inside me shifted. The warmth I'd held on to, the hope that family meant something more than convenience, it all just evaporated. Because the truth was clear, my family didn't care. Not really. They were wrapped up in their own lives, their own plans, their own luxury cruise, while I was left to pick up the pieces of a disaster they hadn't even acknowledged. Over the next few days, I watched their social media posts. Pictures of sunny decks, fancy dinners, laughter with cocktails in hand, while I was stuck sorting through ruined equipment and canceled bookings. Comments like "best family trip ever" and "so grateful for this time together." I wanted to scream at the screen, but I kept quiet. Instead, I started planning. So, after that call with Marissa, I spent a couple of days just sitting with the silence they left behind. The silence of unanswered texts, ignored calls, and social media posts showcasing their perfect vacation without a single thought for me. I won't lie, the loneliness was heavy. But it wasn't just that. It was the way they had all collectively decided I wasn't worth the trouble. It felt like a wall had been built between me and the family I thought I belonged to. And more than anything, I wanted them to feel what that was like, being shut out, invisible, disregarded. I started by quietly gathering every little detail I could about their cruise plans. I was already blocked from the group chat, but I wasn't about to let that stop me. I reached out to a distant cousin, someone I had always been friendly with but never particularly close to. His name's Dylan. Dylan was kind of an outsider too, never quite fit into the family's high expectations, and that made him more willing to talk. Over coffee one afternoon, I asked about the cruise, who was going, what the schedule was, even which suite numbers some of the family members had booked. At first, he was hesitant, but I reminded him gently that family wasn't really about who got to go on fancy trips. It was about being there for one another. He nodded and quietly shared the information. It turns out the cruise was more extravagant than I had imagined. Multiple suites booked under my parents' names, with Marissa and Brooke in adjoining cabins, Aaron and his family in a private penthouse suite, and Caleb tucked away in a smaller but still luxurious cabin. The entire itinerary was a nonstop parade of spa treatments, gourmet dinners, and shore excursions. It was the kind of trip most people dream about but rarely get to experience. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my apartment, surrounded by boxes of damaged supplies, working every hour I could to salvage what little I had left. The contrast was almost cruel. But instead of stewing in bitterness, I turned that contrast into motivation. I decided that when they came back, sun-kissed, relaxed, and likely boasting about their trip, they'd find me in a very different place than when they left. I started with the business side of things. I reached out to a local community center that offered commercial kitchen space for rent. It wasn't fancy, but it was functional and affordable. With a bit of negotiation, I secured a spot to restart my catering business on a limited scale. It was a stretch, but I was determined. At the same time, I began contacting clients and vendors, not to ask for favors, but to reassure them. I was upfront about the fire and the temporary closure, but I promised I'd be back soon. Many appreciated the honesty, and a few even offered support or referrals. What I didn't do was tell my family any of this. Not a word. I wanted them to come back and see the outcome on their own. And I started planting little seeds, two quiet reminders of their neglect. I posted a few subtle updates on social media, photos of the community kitchen with captions about resilience and fresh starts. Nothing direct, but enough that if any of them saw it, they'd know I was moving forward without their help. What hurt the most, though, was the way they had spoken about me while on their trip. Through Dylan and a few other family members who weren't on the cruise, I learned that Marissa had been making comments about me, how pitiful my situation was, how unfortunate it was that I wasn't more responsible with money, how I was apparently draining the family with my problems. It felt like a punch in the gut, but I turned that pain into fuel. One evening, I got a message from Dylan with a short video clip he'd taken at the cruise's welcome party. In it, I could hear Marissa loudly talking about how, if anyone wanted to come, they'd have to pay their own way, and laughing about how I was probably too broke to even think about it. I watched it twice before sending a simple message back to Dylan. Thanks for this. Keep me updated. That week, as they were enjoying their trip, I was quietly working behind the scenes to rebuild. But I was also planning something else, a way to make them face the consequences of their choices. Because what I realized was this: their cruelty wasn't just about a vacation or money. It was about power, about control, about making me feel like I didn't belong. The days after the cruise felt like a quiet calm before a storm. I watched from the sidelines as their perfect vacation came to an end, knowing the next chapter was about to begin, and it wasn't going to be the kind of reunion they expected. They returned, glowing and full of stories, expecting admiration and congratulations. Instead, I greeted them with quiet confidence and a calm smile, which I'm sure threw them off. They were used to me being the invisible sibling, the one they could ignore or dismiss without consequence. But now, something was different. The first moment of real tension came during the family dinner the weekend after their return. Everyone gathered at my parents' house, still buzzing from the cruise, sharing photos and memories like trophies. Marissa was at the center, recounting the best meals and spa treatments with her usual self-satisfaction, and the others chimed in with similar stories. I listened quietly, then when the conversation paused, I cleared my throat. "I'm glad you all had a wonderful time," I began. "It sounds like the trip was incredible." There was a chorus of "it was" and nods. I continued, "While you were away, I was able to secure a commercial kitchen space downtown. It's not fancy, but it's a start to rebuild the business after the fire." The room shifted. Some eyebrows raised. Others exchanged quick glances. "I've been working with previous clients to keep the catering going on a smaller scale. It's not easy, but it's progress." Aaron shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. "That's good to hear." Then I dropped the next part carefully. "Funny thing is, I learned that during the cruise, there was a lot of talk about me. Not very kind talk, actually." Marissa's smile tightened. "Oh? What kind of talk?" she asked, voice sharper than before. I kept my tone even. "Comments about how I wasn't responsible, how I was a drain on the family, and how I probably couldn't afford to join you. I even heard someone laugh about me being too broke to be invited." A silence fell over the table, the kind of silence that carries more weight than shouting ever could. I looked each of them in the eye. That hurt. But more than that, it made me realize how little you all understood what I've been going through, and how little you care. Marissa finally spoke, trying to mask defensiveness with irritation. "Look, we didn't want to bother you with details you couldn't manage." I shook my head. It wasn't about managing a trip. It was about family. And when I needed help, you turned away. The tension was thick. Then I revealed the part that really unsettled them. "I've already lined up several catering events for the next few months, including some you might be interested in. Weddings, corporate gatherings, even a large charity gala downtown. And I'll be handling all the contracts, vendors, and payments personally." I saw Marissa's lips press into a thin line. Aaron's face was tight. "I'm taking steps to rebuild everything from the ground up. And I want you to know, I won't be relying on anyone who thinks I'm a charity case." At that moment, the power balance had shifted. But I wasn't done. "Also," I added, "I made sure to document everything from the fire damage to your comments and your decision to exclude me, just in case anyone asks why the family is suddenly so fractured." I left it hanging there, watching the storm brewing behind their eyes. They realized that the little empire of privilege and control they had been living in was cracking. Their dismissiveness, their cruelty, it wasn't going to go unnoticed or unchallenged. That night, after everyone left, I sat back and let the quiet satisfaction settle. The family drama was far from over, but this was the turning point. The moment when their villainy met its match. After that charged dinner, the atmosphere in the family shifted in ways I could feel but no one dared to acknowledge. The cruise had left them glowing, yes, but also brittle, like they'd been jolted awake from a comfortable illusion. I wasn't sure if they realized just how much I'd changed in their absence, or how much I had been quietly planning. The following week, I began by reaching out to some of the key people in our social circle, vendors, event planners, even a few past clients who had been close to the family. I didn't announce it outright, but I started gently dropping hints that I was back in business, that I had new resources, that I was open for bookings again. Slowly, word spread. It wasn't long before I got a call from a major local event organizer, someone who had worked with the family before. They told me a wedding had just been canceled. The client had heard about the fire and wasn't sure who to trust with their event anymore. I told them I understood completely and offered to meet with them the next day. When we met, I took great care to show them my new kitchen space, walk them through my plans, and most importantly, share my commitment to quality and professionalism. It was exhausting work, but it was necessary. Meanwhile, I kept my interactions with the family minimal and strategic. I wasn't interested in petty arguments or emotional outbursts. I was focused on building something they could no longer ignore, a life and business that thrived without them. But the family didn't take it lying down. Marissa, in particular, became more aggressive in her subtle digs. At a brunch with a few extended family members, she whispered to one cousin loud enough for me to hear, "It's cute how she thinks she can come back from nothing. Like she's suddenly the star of the show." Brooke would roll her eyes when I walked into her room, exchanging looks with Marissa as if I were a problem they just wanted to erase. Aaron, ever the responsible oldest, started questioning my choices in front of others, why I was renting a commercial kitchen instead of buying, why I wasn't taking out a bigger loan, why I hadn't just moved on and found a regular job. At family gatherings, they talked around me, making plans and decisions without inviting me. Their behavior wasn't just cold, it was deliberate. Like I was some inconvenient truth they'd rather sweep under the rug. But what they didn't realize was how well I was watching and learning. One evening, I overheard a conversation between Marissa and Brooke at a restaurant. They were talking about a big charity gala happening in 2 months, a high-profile event the family had supported for years. Marissa was laughing about how the family had already promised the catering contract to one of their friends, because we can't trust her to pull it off. That was the moment I knew I had to act. I decided to send a professional, carefully worded proposal directly to the gala organizers. No family involvement, no intermediaries. Just me and my team, laying out what we could offer, menu options, staffing, logistics, and a plan that would make their event seamless and memorable. A week later, I got the call. The organizers were impressed and wanted to meet. The family's friends had apparently been unreliable in the past, and they were seriously considering giving me the contract. That news hit the family like a thunderclap. I watched the subtle cracks form. Marissa's usual smug confidence slipped during a family dinner when the gala topic came up. Aaron tried to steer conversations away, but the tension was palpable. What they still didn't understand was that this wasn't just about a business contract or a few events. It was about respect, about finally being seen as someone they couldn't push aside. The weeks after securing the charity gala contract were unlike anything I'd experienced since the fire. The pressure was still there, but now it was accompanied by a growing sense of accomplishment. For the first time in months, I felt like I was reclaiming not just my business, but my life. The gala itself was a turning point, not just professionally, but personally. The event was held at one of the city's most prestigious venues, and I made sure every detail was perfect. My team arrived early, coordinated flawlessly, and the food received more compliments than I dared hope for. Local newspapers featured the gala in their social pages, highlighting the exceptional catering. I even got a thank you letter from the organizers, praising my professionalism and dedication. That letter meant more than any family acknowledgement ever had. Word spread quickly. New clients began calling, impressed that I had pulled off such a high-profile event. Suddenly, the pitiful sibling who couldn't manage her life was becoming a respected entrepreneur in the community. Meanwhile, the family's reactions were impossible to ignore. Marissa, who had always been so quick to judge, went silent whenever the gala came up. At one holiday gathering, I overheard her muttering to Brooke about how unexpected my success was, but even her words were tinged with resentment rather than pride. Aaron, who once lectured me about taking the safe path, no longer brought up my business at all. His usual condescending tone was replaced by forced politeness, as if he were trying to avoid admitting defeat. My parents, who had been so dismissive and absent, seemed to shrink away from direct conversations. When I asked them point-blank why they hadn't supported me when I needed it most, their answers were vague excuses about not wanting to burden me with family plans or expecting me to handle my own problems. I didn't buy it. It was clear to me that they had made a choice, a conscious decision to exclude me, to protect their image rather than their family. That truth was a wound, but it was also a liberation. At the next family event, I made my intentions clear. I wasn't there to argue or seek approval. I greeted them with civility, but I was firm about my boundaries. "I appreciate that we share history," I said quietly, "but family is more than that. It's about showing up for one another. You didn't, so I'm choosing to move forward without the drama." There were a few shocked faces, some awkward silences, but no one challenged me. I left the gathering early, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. From that moment on, I slowly began to pull away. I stopped attending family functions. I stopped answering calls that felt like guilt trips disguised as concern. When messages came, I responded only if they were respectful and straightforward. Otherwise, I let them go unanswered. Cutting ties was not easy. There were moments when I missed what could have been, moments when the loneliness crept in. But the clarity of my decision kept me grounded. I was no longer willing to tolerate being treated as less than. I was no longer willing to wait for a family that chose vacations over support, luxury cruises over loyalty. Instead, I built a new community around me. Friends who celebrated my wins, colleagues who respected my work ethic, clients who trusted me to bring their events to life. The business grew steadily. I hired my first full-time employee. I expanded my kitchen space. I started mentoring others who were rebuilding their lives after setbacks. Each achievement was a reminder that I didn't need the family that had abandoned me to succeed. Today, I am at peace with my choice. I no longer carry the weight of their rejection. I am proud of the person I have become, the business I have built, and the boundaries I have set. If they ever try to reach out again, I will listen, but only with clear limits. Because forgiveness is not something I owe to people who made their priorities clear by leaving me behind. Some bridges aren't meant to be crossed again. And I'm finally ready to live my life on my own terms, free from the shadows of a family that chose to leave me in the dark. That's the full story. Living well and walking away, that was my real revenge. When I got divorced, my family took my ex's side and told me to stay quiet. I said, I'd rather be alone. 5 days later, I took one action that changed everything. Now my sister is calling, screaming, "Please fix this." I'm 32, and I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Divorce wasn't something I thought I'd experience in my 30s, especially not with all the plans Daniel and I had made together. Our life was supposed to be one long, gradual walk towards stability, or at least that's what I thought. But here I am, sitting in my living room, staring at my phone, unsure how everything got this complicated. For a bit of context, I'm Nicole, 32 years old, and up until recently, I was married to Daniel. We met when I was 23, and we were that couple everyone assumed would last forever. We both came from relatively quiet backgrounds. Daniel, though a little reserved, was kind and thoughtful. I always thought of myself as a bit of an overthinker, someone who needed a lot of reassurance in relationships. But with Daniel, I thought I was okay. Our marriage was never perfect, but it was comfortable. The kind of comfortable where you don't ask too many questions and assume that as long as everything is mostly good, it's fine. I worked at a marketing firm, and Daniel worked as an architect. It was a routine life, mundane, but pleasant. But then, one day, everything changed. And it wasn't some dramatic moment, not at first. It was just one of those little things. His phone buzzed, and when I glanced over at it, I saw a text from someone named Sophia. The message simply said, "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe." I didn't react at first. I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe a friend? Maybe a colleague? Maybe I was overthinking it. But then, the next night, it happened again. Another text, another message. And this time, it wasn't just babe. It was something more intimate, something that made my stomach twist. I wasn't sure what to do. Should I confront him? Should I ask him directly? Or should I wait for him to come clean? I opted for the latter, thinking maybe he would own up to whatever was going on. But he didn't. Days went by, and his behavior seemed off. He became distant, avoided eye contact, and when I finally did ask him, "What's going on? I'm seeing these messages," he just shrugged it off with the kind of nonchalance that made my blood run cold. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, looking away. "It's just a friend. Nothing to worry about." But I knew. I trusted my gut, and I knew the truth. The gut punch came a week later when I was looking through his things, an accident, I swear, and found evidence of an affair. It wasn't just a text here and there. It was an entire relationship. Months of sneaking around, and I was the last to know. The anger I felt in that moment, the betrayal, it was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know how to process it. But what I did know was that this marriage was over. No amount of counseling or apologies could fix the years of lies. So I kicked him out that night, and I told him to never come back. Now, here's where things get complicated. This isn't just about me and Daniel anymore. It's about my family. And I guess, in a way, It always has been. My family, like most families, is complicated. I've always had a fairly decent relationship with my mom and sister, Lana. My parents are old-fashioned, especially my mom. She's the type who believes in the sanctity of marriage and thinks that no matter what, you keep it together for the family. She's the type who would make you feel guilty for not smiling at a family gathering when you've just been through something traumatic. But I wasn't prepared for what happened when I told them. My mom's response wasn't a wave of support. It wasn't, "Oh, Nicole, I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Instead, she looked at me and said, "Are you sure you're not overreacting? Maybe you should have been more understanding. You know how much pressure Daniel's been under with work." Pressure. As if that would make everything okay. Lana, my sister, was no better. She didn't directly tell me it was my fault, but she sure implied it. "You know, Nicole, relationships are complicated. You can't expect him to be perfect all the time," she said, almost like it was some kind of pep talk. "Maybe this is a wake-up call for both of you." A wake-up call? A wake-up call for who? Me or him? The worst part, though, was when she told me, "Maybe it's best to just stay quiet. You don't want to make a scene. This kind of thing, it doesn't need to be dragged into the family drama. Don't you think it's better to keep it private?" The audacity. As if my hurt, my pain, didn't matter. As if I had to keep everything inside for the sake of appearances. It wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about protecting the family's image at all costs, even if it meant telling me to swallow my anger and pretend everything was fine. And that's when I snapped. Not in some dramatic, angry way, but I just couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't keep acting like everything was okay for their sake. 5 days later, I did something that probably shocked them all. I didn't call Daniel to ask him to come back. I didn't beg for his forgiveness. Instead, I took one simple action. I sent him a letter. It wasn't full of anger. It wasn't a rant. I simply wrote, "I know what's been going on. I'm done. Don't contact me again." I wanted to make one thing clear. I was done with the lies, done with the shame, done with being quiet. And I wanted Daniel to know it wasn't about him anymore. It was about me finding my own peace. The response wasn't immediate, but I could feel it. The tension started rising with every hour that passed. I didn't expect anyone to understand, but the calls began coming in. First from Lana, then from my mom. Both of them were furious. Lana was the first to get through. "What did you do?" she screamed when I picked up. Her voice was a mixture of anger and fear, but it was mostly fear. "Mom is losing it. You've gone too far, Nicole. You need to fix this. You're making a huge mistake." I stayed calm. "Lana, I'm not the one who made the mistake. Daniel did that, and I'm not going to cover for him anymore. Not for him, and not for this family. Please," she begged, "just talk to Mom. She's freaking out. You're making this public. You're making us look like fools." And there it was again, family image. What about me? What about my hurt? But she didn't get it. As the days dragged on after I sent Daniel that letter, I could feel a strange weight hanging over me. It wasn't the kind of weight I expected. It wasn't a burden of guilt or regret. It was a weight of clarity. I had finally taken control. For the first time in years, I felt like I was making a decision based on my own needs and my own peace of mind. But that didn't mean the world around me was quiet. It was anything but. The first few days after the letter were the most unsettling. The silence from Daniel was almost worse than anything. I had expected him to retaliate, or at least reach out. Maybe try to apologize or justify what he'd done. But he didn't. There was nothing. No phone call, no text, not even an email. I almost felt foolish, waiting for him to respond. But I reminded myself, it wasn't for him. It was for me. And then, as the silence dragged on, the calls from my family kept coming. Lana, my sister, was the first to reach out, her voice laced with desperation. I remember picking up the phone and hearing her practically choke on her words. "You can't just leave it like this, Nicole," she said, her voice trembling with something between frustration and fear. "Mom's already upset enough. She's talking about how you're going to ruin the whole family. You don't want that, do you?" I felt my stomach twist. but I held my ground. Lana, I'm not trying to ruin anyone. I'm just trying to do what's right for me. You can't keep telling me to stay quiet while my whole life falls apart. It's not about family image or pretending to be happy. It's about being honest. She didn't get it. The frustration in her voice only grew. Please, Nicole, I'm begging you. I don't want to have to choose sides here. Don't make me choose between you and Mom. That was the turning point. That's when I realized how much this was all affecting everyone but me. My sister was caught in the middle. She didn't know where her loyalty should lie, and it hurt her to see me standing up for myself because she had spent so long making peace for the sake of the family. But for me, it wasn't just about standing up to Daniel anymore. It was about standing up to all of them. All the expectations, all the pressure, all the silence they expected from me. I let her ramble, listening to her plead with me, but I didn't change my mind. I can't go back, Lana. I just can't. After the phone call, I sat with the silence of my apartment. It felt peaceful. It was the first time in days I wasn't talking about my marriage or trying to explain myself to people who didn't understand. But that didn't last long. The next day, I got a call from my mom. I'd been bracing for it, but when I saw her name flash on my phone, a knot tightened in my chest. I'd known she'd be upset, but I hadn't expected her to sound so desperate. Nicole, please, she begged as soon as I answered. We need to talk. This can't go on like this. Your father and I are beside ourselves. You're acting like you've given up on everything. I closed my eyes, leaning back in the chair. I didn't know what I was supposed to say to her. I wanted her to understand why I was doing this, but I could tell she wasn't listening. I'm not giving up on everything. I'm just choosing not to stay in a situation that hurts me anymore. I'm not saying you should stay with Daniel, but you need to think about the bigger picture, she said, her voice trembling. What about the family? What will people think of us? This whole thing, it's making us look like we failed. And there it was again, family image. The thing that had been drilled into my mind my entire life. The thing that had always come first, even when I had been second, third, or sometimes not even on the list at all. I don't care about what people think, Mom. What I care about is my happiness. And if that means I have to make hard decisions that upset you, then I will. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear her struggling to come up with something, anything to say. But she couldn't, because she didn't know how to process the fact that her daughter had stopped caring about appearances, stopped caring about what others thought. She wasn't used to me being so firm, and I think she was scared. Her voice cracked as she finally spoke. You're going to regret this. You don't even know how much this is going to hurt you. Please, just fix it. Talk to Daniel. Talk to us. You don't have to be alone. I'm not alone, I said quietly. I have me. I hung up before she could say anything else. It was a hard thing to do, but I knew I couldn't keep justifying my actions for their comfort. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when I felt suffocated by their expectations. But despite all of that, I couldn't shake the feeling of loneliness. Even though I was standing firm in my decision, there were moments when the isolation crept in. It's a strange thing, loneliness. You don't expect it to come when you're finally doing the right thing. You expect it when you're stuck in a relationship that doesn't serve you anymore, when you're pretending to be happy for everyone's sake. But when you're standing up for yourself, when you're finally doing what's best for you, that's when loneliness hits. I didn't talk to anyone for a few days after that. I needed the space. I needed to breathe without hearing how much I was hurting them, how much I was ruining everything. But then, a few days after my mom's call, Lana came over. She didn't call first, didn't ask if it was a good time. She just showed up at my door, her face red and puffy from crying. You can't just keep doing this, Nicole, she said, not even bothering to wait for me to invite her in. You're making this worse for all of us. I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the pressure she felt, and something else, fear. Fear that this rift, this mess, might just pull her into it, whether she liked it or not. I'm not doing this to hurt anyone, I said quietly. But you need to stop asking me to fix something that's already broken. I'm not asking you to fix it, she snapped, the edge in her voice sharpening. I'm asking you to stop making it worse. You're making us all look bad. Don't you care about how this is affecting Dad and Mom? They can't keep pretending everything's fine when you're out here making it public. The frustration that had been simmering in me for days began to boil over. I'm not the one who made it public, Lana. I'm just trying to breathe without feeling like I'm drowning. She looked at me then, really looked at me, like she was finally seeing the woman I'd become. And for a moment, I saw something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was understanding, or maybe it was regret. I just, I just don't know what to do anymore, she whispered, her voice cracking. I want things to go back to normal. I want us to be a family again. But I couldn't go back. Not to the version of the family where I had to hide my feelings to keep everyone else comfortable. I can't go back, I said softly. I won't. Lana stood there for a moment, her hands wringing in front of her. Then she turned and walked out, leaving me standing in the doorway, unsure of what would happen next. The silence after Lana's visit lingered for days, like a thick fog that wouldn't lift. I sat in my apartment, wrapped in the stillness, thinking about how everything had crumbled so quickly. It was like a dam had broken, and now all I could do was watch the water surge and try not to drown in it. But as much as I wanted to retreat further into the quiet of my home, there was something gnawing at me, a need for something more, a need to reclaim what had been taken from me. I'd spent too many years letting Daniel take the lead, calling the shots, making decisions that affected both of us but always seemed to favor him. I'd stayed quiet for too long, brushed off my own feelings to avoid conflict, and put the needs of others ahead of my own. But that was before. I wasn't going to be that person anymore. I started thinking about what he had done to me, not just the affair, but everything that had led up to it. The small lies, the constant justifications, the gaslighting. It wasn't just betrayal. It was manipulation. And I wasn't going to let him walk away from this without facing some kind of consequence. I had to make sure he knew that this wasn't something I would just let slip under the rug. At first, I wasn't sure what I could do. I wasn't exactly the type to jump into some grand revenge plot, but something inside me shifted. I had been silenced for too long, by my family, by Daniel, by everyone who thought they knew what was best for me. This was different. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about reclaiming control of my life and my story. So, I started gathering information. I went through old messages, notes, even receipts that Daniel had left behind. I combed through everything with the kind of focus I hadn't had in years. At first, it felt wrong, like I was betraying the version of myself that just wanted to move on and heal. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized how much Daniel had taken from me, not just in the affair, but in every little act of dishonesty that built up over the years. I knew about the affair, but what I didn't know, what I hadn't suspected, was how much he had lied to my face for months before everything came crashing down. He'd been hiding money, too. At first, I thought it was a simple case of him buying small things without telling me. But no, it was worse. There were bank transfers to an unknown account, credit card charges for things I knew he couldn't afford, and mysterious withdrawals. It was like he was living a double life. I felt sick to my stomach as I pieced it all together. This wasn't just about a single betrayal. This was about years of lies, manipulation, and betrayal of my trust on a scale I hadn't even imagined. And I knew one thing. I couldn't let him get away with it. So, I took a deep breath and did something I never thought I would do. I reached out to an old friend of mine, Emily. She was a lawyer, someone I hadn't spoken to much since our college days, but I knew she was sharp and knew how to handle things like this. I didn't tell her all the details yet, just asked her if she could help me dig into a few things. I didn't want her to think I was going overboard, but I knew I needed some guidance. She didn't hesitate. If you have the proof, Nicole, we can do something about it. But I need to know everything. The whole story. That's when I really started digging deep. I went through everything with a fine-tooth comb. I found evidence of multiple transactions that Daniel had hidden, things he had bought that didn't make sense, things he hadn't explained. He was using money that should have been ours to finance his own secret life. I also found receipts for hotels, and not just any hotels, hotels in cities where he claimed to be on business trips. The dots were all connecting, and with each discovery, the urge for revenge grew stronger. But I wasn't just going to go after him in the traditional sense. I didn't want to drag this out into a public spectacle, though I knew that would hurt him. No, I had a plan, something a little more underhanded, something that would hit him where it hurt the most, his reputation. I knew the first step was to gather everything I had, financial records, hotel receipts, credit card statements, and get it all organized. Then, with Emily's help, I started putting the pieces together. Emily was invaluable in making sense of everything. She had connections, and through her, I found out about a few things that Daniel had kept hidden, things he had done that were legally questionable. Things that, if the right people found out about them, could bring everything crashing down. But it wasn't just about the legal side of things. I knew Daniel cared about one thing above all else, his reputation. He had worked hard to build his career, and he was proud of the reputation he'd cultivated. He'd always been the golden boy at work, the charming architect with the perfect life. And I was about to take that away from him. It wasn't hard to find a few key people at his office who would be willing to talk, people who had seen the cracks in his perfect facade. I approached them cautiously at first, making sure to come across as calm and collected, but underneath, my anger was building. I spoke to a few colleagues of his, people who had witnessed his lies and manipulations. They didn't know everything, but they knew enough. And with their help, I was able to paint a picture of someone who was far from the person he'd appeared to be. A few phone calls, a few well-placed conversations, and Daniel's world started to shift. I could feel it. He was starting to lose control, starting to panic. But that was only the beginning. I wasn't done with him yet. Meanwhile, my family was still pressing me. Lana kept calling, sending me texts, showing up uninvited. I could hear the desperation in her voice as she begged me to fix this. But I didn't want to fix it. Not anymore. Not for them. Not for anyone. Finally, the moment came when I knew it was time. I called a meeting with Daniel's boss, a man who'd been like a mentor to him for years. I didn't know what would happen next, but I was ready for it. I walked into that meeting with Emily by my side, holding all the proof I needed. Everything from the financial discrepancies to the hotel receipts to the secret life Daniel had been living. I laid it all out, step by step, with no emotion, just cold facts. I don't want to make things difficult for anyone, I told Daniel's boss, my voice steady. But I think you should know who you're really dealing with. The silence in the room was thick. I watched the man's face change as he absorbed everything. He didn't say much at first, just sat back in his chair, staring at the documents. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "This is a lot to take in," he said. "But I'll make sure it's handled." It wasn't just about getting revenge on Daniel anymore. It was about making sure the people who had stood by him, who had trusted him, understood the truth. It was about making sure he knew that what he had done would not go unpunished. As I left the meeting, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: satisfaction. Daniel had never thought I would fight back. He had assumed I would just let it all slide, pretend to be the quiet wife who took care of everything. But I wasn't that person anymore. And as the days went by, I could feel the walls closing in on him. His carefully constructed world was beginning to crack, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The fallout came faster than I had anticipated. After the meeting with Daniel's boss, things started to move quickly. I don't know if it was the combination of the undeniable evidence I presented or the realization that Daniel's once perfect reputation was crumbling before him, but the results were swift. His boss, after processing everything, had a quiet word with the company's legal team. From there, things snowballed. Within a week, Daniel was placed on temporary leave, pending a full internal investigation. The company started pulling back on contracts that he had worked on as people began to question the integrity of their projects, now tainted by his actions. I never meant for him to lose his career, but I wanted him to understand the full scope of the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, and the fact that his actions, no matter how neatly he had tried to hide them, had consequences. In the following days, the phone calls from my family became increasingly urgent. I ignored them at first, letting my phone go straight to voicemail. Lana's frantic messages were the most insistent, full of desperation, telling me to end this, and that family doesn't do this to each other. I couldn't help but wonder why they hadn't considered the betrayal I had endured all these years. But their constant pressure was only a reminder of how deeply ingrained they were in the narrative of keeping up appearances, preserving the family's image, making everything look like it was fine. It had never been fine, and it wasn't going to be anymore. Eventually, I gave in to the guilt, or maybe it was just the weight of everything becoming too much to ignore. I called Lana. Her voice cracked when she answered. "Nicole, please. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is bigger than you realize. What you're doing is going to ruin everything. Dad and Mom don't even know how to look at you anymore." Her words stung, but I was resolute. "I'm not trying to ruin anything, Lana. I'm trying to finally fix what's been broken for years. I've been silent. I've stayed quiet. I've pretended that everything was fine for all of you. But it hasn't been. It hasn't been fine for me." She didn't respond immediately, just let the silence hang for a moment. "Then what? What do you want me to do? How do we fix this?" I sighed, feeling the weight of it all. "I don't want to fix it. I can't fix it. Daniel made his bed. Now he has to lie in it. I'm done pretending that I can fix something that's beyond repair." The line went quiet, and I could hear Lana trying to process my words. After a long pause, she spoke softly, her voice raw. "I just don't understand why you couldn't keep this quiet. Why couldn't you have just walked away quietly, without making it a scene? I felt my chest tighten as I spoke. Because I've walked away quietly for so long. I've lived in silence, in the shadows of everyone else's expectations, and I'm done. I deserve to live my life without feeling like I'm always walking on eggshells for everyone else's comfort. Lana didn't reply. Instead, there was just a long, pained silence on the other end. I felt a pang of guilt, but it quickly faded. I couldn't let myself back down now, not after everything that had happened. A few days later, I received a letter from Daniel's lawyer. It wasn't exactly unexpected, but it still sent a cold shiver down my spine. They wanted to discuss the terms of the divorce, though it was clear from the tone of the letter that they were looking for a way to push me into some kind of quiet settlement. They even offered to negotiate a favorable outcome for me if I would simply refrain from going public with the details of his actions. I consulted with Emily one last time, making sure I was making the right decision. She helped me draft a response to the lawyer, rejecting the settlement and insisting that I would be proceeding with the divorce, as well as filing for legal action regarding the money he had taken from me. I couldn't let him get away with that either. It wasn't just about the affair, it was about everything else he had done to me. At that point, I realized that the situation had gone beyond what I had originally planned. Daniel was losing his grip, and I could see it. His perfect life was unraveling, piece by piece, and now there was nothing he could do to stop it. The public would soon learn about his deception, the lies, and his secret spending, and there was nothing he could hide anymore. The guilt that he had buried deep inside of him started to surface, and I could almost feel his panic over what was happening. By the time the divorce was finalized, it was clear that Daniel had been stripped of everything he thought he could keep. His company had distanced itself from him, and several of his clients had begun pulling out. His social circle began to shrink as whispers of his dishonesty spread. The reputation he had carefully curated for so many years crumbled, and all that was left was the truth and the mess he had made. As for me, I finally felt a sense of peace. It was strange at first, being alone in the apartment, but there was a kind of freedom in it, a freedom I hadn't known in years. I didn't have to worry about pretending, about keeping up appearances, about making everyone else comfortable at the expense of my own happiness. Lana came to visit one last time before everything was completely finalized. Her face was softer now, less defensive, but there was still a faint trace of the guilt that had been eating at her. "I just don't get it," she admitted, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "Why didn't you just let it go? Why did you have to go after him like that?" I looked at her, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. "Because, Lana, I've spent my whole life letting things go. I've stayed silent, hidden behind everyone else's drama and expectations, and I finally decided I wasn't going to do it anymore. I couldn't let him get away with it. I had to do this for me." Her eyes welled up. "I don't know if I'll ever understand, but I guess I respect you for standing up for yourself." And that, in the end, was enough for me. I didn't need their full approval, not anymore. I had stood up for myself. I had taken control of my life, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly free. The family drama was still there, of course, but it didn't affect me in the same way. Daniel had learned the hard way that actions had consequences. And me? I had learned that sometimes, the only way to heal is to take the hard road, to stop hiding, and to finally let go of the things and people that hold you back.